of collaboration and respect and working together in this sport. It's just 19 organisations pulling in a different direction. And that holds us back as a sport. So the really difficult realisation we came to was that couldn't be fixed. CA couldn't be fixed. We needed to start again. And we needed to democratise the sport. Take out layers of bureaucracy and hand it back to the clubs, because the clubs and the volunteers who work in those clubs are the real owners of the sport. That's sort of my heritage. That's where I come from. So we should create a new organisation and hand ownership of that organisation back to the grassroots and stop talking about sport. Just talk about cycling, about people who commute, about people whose kids want to ride to school, about, you know, in every city there's a discussion about density and transport. Cycling's the transport mode of the future. There are very few politicians nationally who feel under pressure from the cycling sector. So that's the realisation we came to, but it's difficult. You know, I hope to be the last ever chair of Cycling Australia, and it's a rich organisation with lots of history. And how do I know that the organisation's going to be well run in future? Who's going to be on the board in 5 years? Where's it going to be headquartered? It's much easier to worry about change. It's much easier to stick with the status quo than take a leap of faith. And this will require a leap of faith. The reality is in WA, I think WA leads the country in reform. There's been a unification, largely, of the sport. I hope WA would lead this conversation. That hasn't transpired to be the case, but I think this is the high water mark of cycling in the country from a structural perspective. But there is fear and vertigo for all of us. You know, rolling our people, rolling our assets into a new organisation. You know, there are some really good answers that you will hear from Shane and Martin about how we protect what's precious today, and then how we make sure there are people on the ground who continue to do their jobs, and all the important things that are happening in each state and in each discipline continue to happen. So we've got to come up with those protections, but then we've got to find new ways to support clubs, to create national bike ed programs, to create national infrastructure policies, to take all the things that are happening really well in a pocket. New South Wales does junior development really, really well. How do we take the pockets of excellence and spread them across the country and push them down to the great grassroots? So I understand there's fear, and it's hard, and it's scary, and I'm worried. I'm worried we're going to create some big grey bureaucracy in the centre. And there'll be a homogenisation of identity. But a lot of really well-intentioned people who are really passionate about this sport have spent a long time thinking about what's the best model. And this is the model we've come up with, and we offer it, you know, calmly and humbly and out of passion for this, for our love of cycling. And we haven't been able to think of a better way. So thanks for listening to us tonight. Ask any questions you've got. Please don't be shy. It's very hard to hurt our feelings. You know, there's a good website, AusCycling.com.au. Every time we're asked a question, we want questions we haven't thought of the answers to before. Every question we've thought of, we've been asked that we haven't had an answer, we've put up there. This is supposed to be a collaborative process. It has been a collaborative process in my view. So if you've got concerns, I know you do, we all do, I've told you about mine, please ask. And thanks for having us here.
Test. Good evening everyone, my name is Paul Connors, I represent the BMX Australian Board. I've been involved in the sport for about 20 years through different club, well started off as a rider, had a very bad accident and that put end to that pretty quickly, and then moved through club, state, zone and national body organisations. Tonight is a great opportunity. I think tonight we start off with a success, because back when I first started in the sport, there would not in my lifetime think that we'd have 3 parts of our community in the one room and in numbers like this. So well done to WA for doing that. It's actually a win to start off with. Tonight is a great opportunity for all of you to ask questions. There's a lot of speculation out there, a lot of innuendo out there, there's a lot of unknown out there. Use the Q&A time very wisely. There's no dumb questions and there's no dumb answers, I hope. And we'll certainly aim to answer all of your questions. Don't take it back and be a keyboard warrior. You know, I'm, I guess, very passionate about that. I speak often about keyboard warriors. If you've got an opportunity to speak up, and most keyboard warriors are uninformed, we'd much rather inform them and educate them with the facts. So welcome, have fun tonight. Make sure you do ask the questions. There'll be roaming mics, and I'll hand over to Lee.
Thank you. So we're just going to get shorter and shorter as the evening goes on, but thanks Duncan, he said an awful lot there. So Lee Brensall, Chair of Mountain Bike Australia. So I've been on the board for about 18 months and been in that role for just coming up to a year now. I mean, like others, I've been in the sport for about 20 years, so passionate mountain biker, compete and still enjoy competing, but more so enjoying being a great role model to my kids as well and my family who all mountain bike. But I've also declare a conflict of interest. I have a road bike as well. And you know, and I started out doing triathlons, and you know, just my lifestyle traveling around the world, I was able to you know, enjoy the countryside a little bit better on a mountain bike. So I think you know, for me, I work in corporate governance, major projects, have done some time here in WA as well, originally from here. So you know, on some of the big mining, oil and gas projects. I got into corporate governance, board director roles as well, because I realised that I could actually bring some of my work skills into the sport that I really love. So that's sort of how I've merged the two, and quite enjoy being able to bring some of that knowledge into something that I really enjoy. Yeah, as Duncan said, there's some big changes, big changes that are coming in society, but they're already here as well. You know, I see that with my children, you know, the screen time, you know, the mental pressure that they're under as well, and, you know, I certainly really enjoy getting out. It doesn't have to race, you know, just to get out into the bush and to enjoy some of those trails and the, you know, the relief and the stress that you know, relieves for me. Or if it's a destination, you know, going somewhere new and actually being able to ride your bike. So, you know, I'd like to think that you know, that we can be inclusive, that we can be fair and equitable, and that we can actually have those conversations together to tackle what is quite a significant problem within Australia. You know, there's a huge opportunities, and we'll talk about a lot of those tonight. So, yeah, I'd say what I'm looking forward is the future. So, you know, the major projects that I work in, sort of 50 to 100 year project plans that we put forward. I don't think that we could do that for cycling, but we're talking about something here which is maybe 5 to 10 years into the future. You know, we've got a rich history. We you know, look to honour that and learn from that, but take us to the next level as well. There's a lot of other sport, there's a lot of other time, that pressure that is being taken, and our children are the ones feeling that. And you know, we're all living longer as well, so we want to be able to ride bikes. You know, it could be an e-bike, it could be a mountain bike, it could just be a you know, a trail bike or a cruiser, whatever you want to, and you can change throughout your life as well. So I would reiterate, you know, thanks for coming, welcome. Please ask questions, you know, look at the material, think about the opportunities and the future that we're trying to set up here for the, you know, for the next generation, but also for us. Hopefully we're going to be around a little bit longer as well. So I'll hand over to Shane and Martin, who'll take us through the presentation, and then we'll be able to answer any questions.
Thanks, Lee. For those who don't know me, my name's Shane Coppin. I've been with MTBA coming up to 6 years now. And during that time, I've seen an awful lot of change through cycling and mountain biking and BMX, but just for those who are in the community or ride a bike. But I think also during that time I've seen, and I'm probably been guilty of being involved in so many opportunities that we've missed collectively to do better for the sport and for the people who ride, because we just have not been in sync. We spend a lot of time fighting, and that needed to stop. We've spent a lot of time in a fragmented environment, and that needed to stop. And I think when we look at our 19 organisations that we're currently talking to around this proposal, we're all working for the same objectives: to get more members, to deliver great value to those members, to deliver education opportunities, to lobby and advocate for them to have places to ride or new infrastructure, all those things. But we've chosen, and we found ourselves in a position where we're actually doing it as 19 separate entities. And we really have not done that well. You know, I hear the history that the sport is 136 years old, yet we sit collectively with 55,000 odd members. I look at other sports, professional sports, that are 130 years old as well. They're nowhere near that. And the environment is changing. I question, have we really been able to achieve the potential for this sport when we consider that there's 2.5 to 4 million people ride a bike regularly? Have we been able to do that? So as we go through the slide deck, all I ask is you try and keep an open mind to what we're proposing. And when we're proposing this model, consider that we've looked at it from a national perspective, but we've looked at it from a perspective of every state, of every rider throughout the country. We've tried to make a model that is respectful and reflective of that challenge, to bring together a nation, all those 19 entities in all different groups. We've got many of those organisations who struggle year by year and survive just by the grants that they get. We need to get beyond that. We need to create organisations that thrive, and that grants become things that we can use purely for the benefit, not to open our doors. So as we go through, please keep an open mind. Consider if we don't change what our future looks like, and then consider what our future looks like in 5, 10, 15, 25 years. Consider what it looks like for our kids, grandkids, and all those who follow. So if it's all right, I might just move out to the front so I can work through the slides, please.
Just while he's finding his laser beam. This is being live streamed, and I'm going to just put in a quick mention for people who are watching on the live stream. If you've got questions, please put them onto the live stream, and we can, when the Q&A is active, I'll try and read your questions out. So sorry to interrupt, Shane, and as you were.
We've just got a video that we'll start with. Realistically, what we're talking about is working together, sharing together, growing together. So if we start with some tangible benefits around AusCycling, and I'm sure many have seen these slides, so I'll try and go through maybe a little bit quicker tonight so we can leave some more time for questions at the end. But we're talking about one race license, and it'll be cheaper for the majority of riders. That's to allow people to have greater access across the disciplines, so that if you do something now and you want to try something different, you've got the same licence, a single licence, and it's much easier to do that. More resources directed back into club and member services. We feel that we do a lot of things repeating each other and trying to create the same systems. We want to create better systems, and we want to actually create as many tangible resources that we can make available to clubs and members to help them in their day-to-day and ongoing activities for delivering the sport. We're talking about unifying the sport across all disciplines to improve and facilitate better commercial outcomes. It's not something that we've collectively done well. We've looked at across all the organisations, and if you exclude event funding, not one of the organisations currently has in excess of a $100,000 cash sponsor. Direct investment into securing facilities and infrastructure, and I acknowledge the work that has been done in the West, and you do lead in this area, but certainly it is something that lacks considerably in the other states and regions of the country that we need to do more work and get better at. We want one voice. 19 organisations walking in. I can tell you 3 organisations walking into Sport Australia doesn't really get you much. We really need to come together so that we represent a bigger voice, we become harder to ignore, and we actually have a tangible benefit to those people that we're lobbying for support to invest back into us so that they can get gains as much as we can. We want to create better pathways for staff, and the reality is the largest organisation that we're talking about, excluding the high performance program that's in the Australian cycling team, is about 20 staff. The next is 16, the next is about 11, then we've got 10. And the truth is, if those organisations lose staff in some of those areas, core areas, puts a huge burden on the organisation, creates a lot of pressure, and we just end up having to rebuild and start. But we lose staff because our organisations don't provide a lot of opportunities for crossover of movement. You come into one of the organisations, you work, great people come into these organisations, but then they go to pursue their career in other sports. And we lose a lot of good quality people. So we want to create pathways for staff. We want a national footprint for all disciplines. We've talked about a national bike ed program to get more kids riding. We need to get back to the days where kids rode to school, as Duncan alluded to. But it's about teaching people to ride a bike just to start with. The enjoyment of riding a bike. How do you set the bike up? How do you change your tyre? All these basic skills that we all probably learned as kids doesn't happen today. So we want to take a better approach to that, and that requires working collectively together to try and achieve that. A national volunteer recognition program. So this sport, all these activities that we do, thrive on volunteers. Without volunteers, it just would not happen. We've looked at MTBA at trying to create a national recognition program. It's a very challenging thing to try and get those things in place. We want to do that collectively across all the disciplines. There is so many people, I'm sure, who would be willing to volunteer and help another discipline in their endeavours and activities at club level. There are many people who exist outside the sport who just like to volunteer. We need a way to introduce them into the organisation. It was put to us that there's a reverse volunteer thing where people who might do graphic design and have nothing to do with one of the sports or the activities just wants to give back to something. We don't have access to those sort of people as much as we should, and we can do that through a national program. Greater financial strength to allow us to invest and develop more in cycling. You can only do with what dollars you've got. We need to be able to try and pool our dollars together more to try and give ourselves more opportunities to do things. We've talked about one licence and a single membership fee. What we've endeavoured to do here is create a very simple structure. Right now, I think when we sat down and tried to work out the membership fees and structures, there was 250 different permutations across all the disciplines, the various states. So we've come up with a model where it talks about a base membership fee, which is your normal recreational licence or membership to the organisation to cover you while you're just riding your bike, riding to work, commuting, training, anything other than competing. And then if you choose to, you can upgrade that licence and pay a higher fee to be able to race in mountain bike and, well, as a dirt licence, mountain bike, BMX and CX, and then there's an all disciplines as well. On top of these fees is a club fee, There is no state fee that previously existed. This is an all-encompassing fee. There'll be family discounts that will apply that's similar to some of the organisations today. And this is about providing access, and we'll also offer things like day licence, trial licence, payment options, and it'll be a rolling membership. So most of the all organisations have now moved to that format. So some benefits for riders. And these are just some examples of where we think that we can gain some early benefits for riders. Clear and consistent pathways. So a kid comes home from school, says, "Mum, I want to race my bike." She wants to know which bike, which organisation does she ring, what level does she ring, how does she get in touch with clubs. We want to make that a very easy access point. One number, one website, get into the sport, choose your journey throughout the sport, but you only need to find one number to get involved in the first instance. We want to advocate for more rider safety and awareness. We want to provide better value to our membership. It's one thing to have a membership, but we want to make it something that people put value and benefit to. Are we able to negotiate a deal with an Airbnb type organisation so that if you flash your membership card you get a discount? I don't know, but some of the sports, the bigger ones, have been able to achieve some of these things. We want to look at how we can improve the value of a membership. We've talked about one licence, cheaper fees, a strong local united voice for all riders, and access or lobbying to help improve infrastructure, places to ride. Then we talk about the benefits for clubs. Talked about the better recognition for volunteers, improving our systems, processes, resources, templates to support club administrators. I think in one of the forums we had a concept presented that do we provide an online accounting program that's accessible for clubs so that if treasurers change and all that, those systems are all in place and those records are protected. There's many, many opportunities that we can look to do. The Bike Ed program to get more people riding. Similar, improved coaching, pathways, same thing. Come into one point of access and let the staff working for AusCycle direct you through the pathways to deliver the service or the courses that you wish to see. But one of the critical ones is this one here, the no direct impact on club operations or assets. Through this process, some of the clubs have inquired and said, so does this impact on us? How does this impact on us? Do we have to change our constitution? The answer is no. Do we have to transfer our assets and monies to AusCycling? The answer is no. There is no change to a club's operations as it exists today. You do exactly what you continue to do. And what we're committing to trying to do is to create an improved level of service back to you as members through the unification of our various workforces, resources and organisations. Some examples of how a pricing structure might look based on that new membership structure. This one is an example of a Queensland family and it looks at what they pay today based on what they do, including their club fee. Not their club fee, apologies, their state fee. And this family of 5 to do these various activities today, based on the fees, would look at about $800 combined family cost. Under the AusCycling structure, that same family would be looking at $575 before we would apply a discount across that for a family. And most of the family discounts sit at around 10% currently. So I'll let you work that out. And then on top of that, you've got your club fees. All these people could be members of different clubs or members of multiple clubs. That's a choice that they can make. This one's an example of an elite female based in New South Wales who's riding mountain bike and road. She currently pays about $377 before her club fee. Under this new model, she'd be paying $250 before her club fee. So there is a saving there. So this slide here has been put in just to showcase what could be possible. Not what's going to happen necessarily on day one, but what could be possible when an organisation or a sport or well, let's take it as an organisation. This is British Cycling, and they've been at this for a long time. Took them a while to get everything together, but they were able to, by once they got themselves coordinated and into a structure or framework that they could operate and deliver outcomes from grassroots right through to national programs collectively throughout the country, they were able then to have, you know, considerable discussion with potential partners and sponsors, because they were able to deliver outcomes throughout the whole sport, but throughout the whole nation. And this sponsorship, or this partnership with HSBC, is worth £8 million a year, 14.5 million Australian dollars, and it's a multi-year sponsorship. And we're not saying that $14.5 million sponsor is out there from day one, but right now, not one of us has more than, you know, not even a cash sponsor of 100,000. I'd love to have a sponsor of 100,000. I don't have it. And so the reality is that you can't do this unless you've got an asset, and we have fragmented asset, and it's a commercial marketplace. We looked at what the last federal funding campaign did, and I know Matt might want to, there's been a lot of funding gained in WA, and I acknowledge all the work that's been done there. But if we look at it nationally from a federal position, swimming ended up with 150 million in community facilities support. Netball 30 million, the professional sports all racked up considerable amount of about 820 million in commitments from federal government in the last election campaign. Nothing was committed to cycling out of that campaign federally to the whole of cycling. So we are missing opportunities. These groups are the groups that are maximising on their potential, their opportunities, their participation base. They are lobbying hard, and they are, you know, they're getting the dollars back as a result. We don't have that capacity currently. So I'm sure many of you are aware of these slides. This is a fragmented, this identifies the fragmented structure that everyone has spoken about previously. We've got the 3 NSOs. Then we move down, and in the case of road and track, we've got 8 state and territory associations that are the members or make up that group. That creates our 19 that we talk about. So we're just looking at how we can consolidate that, how we can make that chart more streamlined, how we can be more efficient and effective in what we utilise our combined and shared resources better throughout the country. So then we end up with this. And this is what AusCycling is talking about, in that it is a national organisation with offices in every state and territory. And in some of those cases, we will have staff who work remote in some of those locations. That exists today, and those practices will continue as this organisation grows. It's to be a dynamic organisation. But instead of the previous chart, we're now looking at quite a streamlined organisation from a viewpoint of everyone who comes to deal with us. So we're really talking about an improved business model for cycling and for organisations supporting people who ride a bike throughout the country. We're talking about collectively sharing our knowledge, skills and experience from within all the organisations. All the organisations do tremendous work today. They have incredibly capable staff and people working there. People with passion, committed to achieving great outcomes. But they're all working extremely hard. Many of them are generalists. They're trying to do multiple jobs. They can't specialise in one because organisational demands, many things are required to operate these organisations. So we need to try and share and collect that, use that better. That might mean that there's staff in different locations that have skills that can be utilised in other states and regions to help support them and achieve outcomes. All disciplines working together as one, learning collectively, pooling of workforce resources, consolidating our assets and resources to build a stronger base, compete with others, not with each other, and to make AusCycling and cycling, or the activity of riding a bike, much easier for all to access, so that we can have greater cut through with that 2.54 million, whoever it is, who ride a bike, so that they actually are aware that we all exist. Because right now I would suspect there are many of those people riding a bike who don't have any knowledge that our organisations exist. We know we do, but how are we talking outside that bubble of our immediate groups that know about us? We need to do better at trying to get there. So we're talking about investing more into cycling, combining skills and capabilities to improve greater investment into cycling. Under this proposal, Sport Australia are also willing to invest into AusCycling to the tune of $2.5 million. We want to establish long and sustainable position for the organisation, capitalise on financial opportunities. So we're working to build a strong and sustainable financial position. Without money and resources in that way, we cannot have the opportunities to do what we would all like to do. I'm sure we all have ambitions and goals and things that we would love to do. Every CEO working in the organisations would have their wish list, but we just can't achieve it if we don't have money or capital to do it. Positioning the organisation for growth and the sport for growth. Let's not be in 130 years' time saying we've only got 100,000 members. Let's look to see if we can, in the next 10 years, have 250,000+ members combined in the organisation. And then an opening net balance once we come together of in excess of $5 million unencumbered. So I'll skip over this one a little bit because we've covered most of it. So it's about preserving the strengths and growing the organisation and the deliverables back to members that we're working for. But one of the critical ones that came out of the workshops that we've had is around the history and heritage. And we are a proud sport, and we are a sport or a series of organisations that have had a long, proud history, and we need to preserve that, but we need to preserve it at club level, we need to preserve it at state level and territory level, we need to also preserve it at discipline level. So it's something that's very important and something that will be mandated into the AusCycling model. So when we look at the governance structure of AusCycling, and I'll jump a couple of these because it's picked up on a later slide, it's your normal best practice organisational structure. You've got a nominations committee. There'll be a transition board for 3 years, consists of 12 members. I'll come to a later slide to expand on that. But there's two here that I really want to highlight, and the one is the ownership. The ownership of AusCycling is to be by the clubs. So for those who understand MTBA, it's by the individual members. CA and BMX Australia are owned by the member states, and in not all cases, but in most cases, the state organisations are owned by the clubs currently. In WestCycle it's slightly different, and it's slightly different in ACT where individual members own that organisation. But this proposal is about clubs owning AusCycling. There's approximately 520 clubs combined throughout the country. They'll become the owners. They're the heart and soul of our organisations. So it's only right that they own it. And the other thing is that there'll be a new CEO brought in to lead AusCycling into its new future. So the current 3 NSO CEOs are happy to be involved for a short period around transition, but we collectively feel that it's time for someone else to take this lead, and it gives the organisation someone fresh, someone independent, and someone who can take the challenge of bringing all the organisations together for the future. So out of the workshops that we held with all the various state and territory groups, we were able to develop in conjunction with them what's called the State and Territory Advisory Councils. And there's one of these that will exist in every state and territory. And their initial makeup, there is a charter being either finalised, I think, on this. The initial instance will be representatives from road and track, BMX and mountain bike. But that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be mountain bikers. This is up for the states and territories to determine how best they want these representatives to represent their sectors in these state and advisory councils. So it could be someone who has a history in participation. It could be someone who has a background in transport. This is up for those to determine what their needs are. These will in time be developed based on skill-based to determine, but they are a critical part. These are the connection between clubs and members into AusCycle. These are your representatives at state and local territory level who are going to be there to lobby, to identify gaps, to promote and to challenge both the management and the leadership of AusCycling to ensure that it is meeting its obligations back to the communities. These are some of the ideas that have been identified through those workshops of what it will look at, and we've included now the establishment of recommended BMX club fees on a state base. So it'll look at things like state team selection, and it'll work very closely with the GM in each local area. So if we move to the next slide, it gives you an idea of how this fits into the overall structure of AusCycling. These are the state and territories. They're not necessarily positioned at the bottom for any other reason to showcase the slide. These are the groups here that we just identified on the last slide. There's 8 of them, 9 members on each. They'll elect their own chair. The chair of each of those will then go up and sit on the National Advisory Council, so there'll be 8 members of there, 1 representative from each jurisdiction, and from there they'll elect a chair who will then sit on the board of AusCycling. So these start here and they have a connection directly into the board of AusCycling, and then through the management structure these groups will have a connection into the local general manager, who will then have a connection into the various organisational chart and pillars and management levels of AusCycling. We also have sport heritage, technical commissions, athlete commissions, and I want you to have a look at this one here. So Pathways and the Australian Cycling Team. 3 NSOs are very aware that we need to do better in pathways. We need to provide more opportunities for athletes to be developed. But we see that by just dropping it into the Australian Cycling Team doesn't achieve all those outcomes. And we have a number of disciplines right now that don't necessarily fall under the Olympic mandate. So we're creating a pillar called Pathways that works in parallel to the high performance program. We're not suggesting on day one that all the high performance funding will be split equally across all the disciplines. That's not how it works. Works to a remit in conjunction with the AIS. But what we are going to do is seek funding to create a pathways program that is across all disciplines, that is developing opportunities for young athletes to come through from whatever discipline, and to also support those national programs that may not sit right there. In time, as we gain a greater voice and more influence, we'll be able to lobby for more funding and some changes into the high performance program, so as athletes come through the pathways and achieve those outcomes, they can be supported through high performance much in a different way than they are today. So we jump back to the transitional board. We've got a nominations committee made up of 3 representatives, 1 from each of the current mountain bike is Peter McKendry, BMX Sharon Willoughby, Linda Evans from Road and Track, and there'll be an independent member still to be determined. None of these individuals will then sit on the board of AusCycling. They're simply on the nominations committee, and they will vet all applications for people onto the board, and they will make recommendations. The proposed transition board starts with 12 individuals. The 3 chairs from BMX, mountain bike and road and track have already been appointed to those positions. There's 2 more to be added from each of the disciplines, and this is an opportunity for people within the community to nominate for roles, and they'll then go before the nominations committee and recommendations will be made. There's also 3 independent nominees. This will be a skills-based board. It's not just discipline. It says discipline here, but you need to have a set of skills. We're working to create the best board that we can, most professional board that we can, that is inclusive, diverse, and represents locality, gender, all sorts of things, skill sets, to make AusCycling as broad and as professional as we possibly can, and representative of all areas of where people ride a bike. After year 1, 3 positions will drop off this, and the board will roll back to 9, and that will be its number long term and ongoing. It'll be a board of 9. In year 2, 2 of the elected positions will drop down, and there'll be open election, and that's where the membership and the communities and the clubs will vote. So this is a rough, well, it's not a rough, it's what we would call an inverted chart around the organisation and workflow of how AusCycling's been structured from an organisational view. It is centred on members and clubs. They're the heart and soul of what AusCycling is about. And we will have these state and territory officers, as we've described earlier, and their key function is involved in community engagement, sport and local events, local advocacy, and then education programs and other things that directly benefit individual members in local areas. Underneath that, there'll be a corporate office that will support the endeavours and the activities of the state and territory officers. Over to the side, the corporate office will also manage things like membership and some of those centralised functions that need to be done and can be better attained or achieved through one centralised location. Now, when we talk about a corporate office, we're not talking about one set location where all these functions may be set. It could be that the membership team sits in Brisbane and part of it sits in Perth to cover for the full length of a day. It could also mean that finance sits in Tasmania. We haven't got to that point. Just because we have a corporate office, that just simply refers to where an executive might sit. It doesn't mean that that's the be-all and end-all of this organisation. The be-all and end-all of this organisation is its state and territory officers. And we're working to try and create and provide as much resource and efficiency into those as we can. So when we talk corporate office, yes, there'll be somewhere that's nominated probably in the old terminology as a head office, but that's really where a CEO sits. That's it. What we're trying to do is work out where we can get the best value of our staff and where they should be located. So you could find staff located throughout the country and teams located throughout the country. We looked through the workshops and the feedback given to us from the collective disciplines was, what are the things that we want to see the state and local officers do? And this was the list that came back. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's the high level list of things that they wanted to see us do. And where there's a double tick and it has the HO instead of the CO probably, it's about supporting them in what they wanted to achieve. So when you're talking about stakeholder and partner relationships or sponsorship and you're trying to gain a new sponsor, it's about the relationship you build at a local level if it's a local level partner. But what we want to be able to do is give you access to resources, data, support, propositions, proposals. All that work can be done through a corporate office to support that. So you're not having to reinvent the wheel. You're not having to consolidate all that from within all the other offices and pull that together. You have more time to do the actual relationship building and the discussions. And if you want the support from here, it will be there. But if we move down the list, we start to look at things that we don't do as organisations today. Certainly sit on my list of what I would like to have, but I can't. People in HR, people looking after wellness. We talk about sports strategic development. I don't think any one of our organisations has someone whose day-to-day job is to look at, are we meeting our strategic objectives? Are we working to strategic objectives? CEOs all try to do it, but you know, we can do better on that. We can try and put people in roles to support the CEOs and all the general managers in doing that work. We talk about diversity inclusion, sport integrity. We don't have these roles. And these two are ones that have been highlighted very recently on the national, from federal level about they're seeking NSOs. They're looking for NSOs who have these roles, have these services, and have the capability of doing them. And these are starting to become funding criteria for NSO level or federal level funding. We talk about the flow of funds. So when we look at what comes into cycling normally, it's membership fees, grants at state and national level, sponsorship at national and state level, event-related revenues, other revenues. When we look at this slide, it looks like it all goes into one big organisation, and that's true. But remembering the AusCycling brand here is representative of every state and territory office that exists. So this is a culmination. Funding that comes in for state government goes straight back out. Local sponsorship goes straight out. Workforce costs go out. Operating budgets are set on an annual basis between general managers and management. That's all flows back out to meet day-to-day operational costs, day-to-day program costs that have been agreed to, day-to-day event delivery costs that have been agreed to, and then obviously there is an element of cost that supports the corporate office. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. As Shane mentioned, the ownership of AusCycling will be in the hands of the clubs, and we have spent a fair amount of time looking at what that voting model would look like for the clubs. So there were lots of different opportunities to look at. Could it be one club, one vote? Could it be based on membership? So for each member that a club has, they get one vote. Looked at proportional models of various types. We believe that in the end, a proportional club voting model was probably the fairest. It was the one that was able to give some benefit to clubs of size, but not so much benefit that they could rule the roost. We've come up with this model that basically gives clubs an extra vote based on a certain number of extra members that they have. And that extra vote is done on a descending proportional model. So if we look at our clubs at the moment, we've got some small clubs which only have a very few number of members. They'd get one vote. If we've got a club in that up to 780, they'd be getting 12 votes. We think that this is a very fair model. What we've done when we've had a look at it, we've realised that the balance of power basically is in those clubs from 100 to 149 members. That's where the 50th percentile rests. Why didn't we go with a one vote for each club member that you have? We had a look at it and we thought, well, if there's a club with 800 members, compare that to a club with 10 members, that large club would have 80 times the vote that a small club has. And we didn't feel that that was fair. Small clubs are a really important part of the fabric of cycling, and sometimes there's reasons why they're small. They're in a small community. They don't have the ability to have large numbers of members, but we still felt that they should have a reasonable vote in AusCycling. So we think that this is a fair model that will give some recognition to the fact that larger clubs should have a slightly increased say, but also ensures that small clubs aren't completely overridden by a small number of large clubs. When we had a look at this model across the number of members and looked at the proportions of mountain bike, BMX and cycling as they currently are, you'll see that the votes reflect pretty accurately the number of members that would be coming into AusCycling, and on a state level they also reflect those fairly accurately as well. So we think it's a balanced model, and it's one that we're happy to take forward in this proposal. There's been a lot of questions out there around this process, and as you know, this is a proposal that will get voted on by the members. Okay, this is not something that's being mandated from above and forced through from above. This is a proposal that we are taking out to the members to seek their approval on, and it requires the members' approval, the current members' approval, in order to move forward. So in terms of who votes for the AusCycling proposal, well, here in WA, we've got two state associations in BMX and WestCycle, and in mountain bike they have a situation where they don't have a state association and each of their individual members gets a vote. So when we start looking at who's going to vote for it, in BMX, the member clubs will have an opportunity to vote on whether they support the AusCycling proposal, and similarly for WestCycle, the 6 member organisations that are the voting members of WestCycle will have that opportunity to vote to support the proposal or not. And as I said, in mountain bike, any Mountain Bike Australia members here in WA will have the opportunity to vote individually through a vote at their upcoming AGM towards the end of this year. So we've got some dates listed there in terms of recommended dates for, or suggested dates for each of the state associations. We're quite happy to work with the state associations in terms of if those particular dates don't suit, but clearly we're looking at trying to have a vote at state level being completed by November. If we start having a look at implementation, when you vote at your state level or at the national level for mountain bike, there'll be a number of resolutions that will be put to either the AGM or a special general meeting to be held for this. So the three resolutions that will be put forward will be, firstly, a resolution to approve the AusCycling Constitution. Okay, the AusCycling Constitution is available on the AusCycling website. Please feel free to download it, have a look at it. There's been some reviews done on it in comparison to the current existing constitutions for the three national sporting organisations, and what they found is that generally across the board the only major difference is the question of ownership. So in AusCycling it'll be the clubs, in the current existing organisations it's either your state associations or the individual members in mountain bike. The second resolution that would be put forward would be to authorise the transfer of all business and assets from the member organisation to AusCycling. Okay, so there's a lot of talk out there around this is a way for a national body to appropriate the funds of state organisations, and we want to be really clear about this. That just can't happen. It can only happen if there's a conscious decision made by the members to approve that.
If it complies with each state's own individual constitution.
You'll get your chance to comment afterwards. There is... Sorry, what's your question?
In WA, the constitution is quite clearly set up that if the organisation is to be wound up, all the assets revert back to another state-based organisation. So this is actually constitutionally invalid against our... I was part of setting up the constitution for WestSide. This actually totally circumvents the WA constitution.
That's fine, we can... If that's the situation, then you may not be able to vote for it. Yeah, okay, mate. Everybody will get their chance to have their say, if we can just get through the presentation. The third would be then to approve the voluntary cancellation of the entity. Okay, one of the things is the resolutions are conditional. Okay, so if you vote to approve this and AusCycling doesn't end up going ahead for whatever reason, then those resolutions that have been approved effectively lapse and the situation, the status quo continues. It's also noted that these are special resolutions, so they require a 75% approval. What are the implications of a no vote? Well, it's not going to change what you guys are doing at club level, right? Yes or no, what you're doing at club level will continue. The implications are basically the lost opportunities, and the lost opportunities are the things that Shane's outlined. No single licence costs remain the same. We can't get rid of the duplication, limited capacity for lobbying across the country. The difficulties we have with attaining sponsorship will still be there. Financial capacity will be weaker. We'll still be 19 small voices rather than one large one. And the fragmentation will continue, and the confusion that comes with that from people outside of cycling. In terms of the timetables of what's happened, we've had a number of discipline workshops in August where we invited the state associations in, and in mountain bikes' case, the cross-section of clubs. We got a whole lot of feedback in that and took the feedback and incorporated it into the model to strengthen it. We then held a combined discipline workshop where all three disciplines were in the room at the same time. Took them through the amendments. Once again, got some more feedback that we've incorporated into the model. We're now out and around the country, talking to clubs, talking to individual members, seeking your feedback on it. As we've said, we'd like to have voting done at a state level by November. And then if there's approval for it and support for it, we then get into the detailed implementation planning and then look to try and have AusCycling becoming operational at some stage in about Q2 2020. Okay, so it's not going to be a case of we vote and we flick the lights off one day and flick the lights on the next day. There's a lot of work that'll have to go into it and a lot of planning. In terms of our transition approach, well, day one, we hope for clubs will feel exactly like day -1. Okay, nothing's going to change there. What you're doing will be exactly the same. Keep on doing it. We're not going to have a whole lot of new rules and regulations for you. We just want you to keep on doing the great work that you're doing at club level. The quality of the outcome trumps the speed of the implementation. So if we need to take a little bit more time on planning the implementation, then that's what we'll do. We don't want to rush it. We want to take the time to do it properly. The state and territory leaders will take a big role in that transition, in the co-design of it and the implementation of it. And everyone will be respected in that process. In terms of what we feel AusCycling can bring, we've been through that. They're the benefits that we feel will happen. And if we can get those things going, then I think we've got a pretty great organisation.
Questions? Okay, so there was one question that came up in the middle, and it wasn't on mic, so we'll just pop it onto the mic. Is that what you are asking? Yeah. We'll just have a repeat of what you might not have been able to hear in the live stream. So, could you just, for the purpose of this, can you just state your name and what club you're with, if you could, please?
Hello, testing. Yes, Stephen McKeon. I'm a member of ATA, but I'm a cyclist. I ride every day. I'm quite passionate about transport advocacy. I've given up being a chopping block in C-grade masters. My question went to the due diligence involved in the constitutionality of those discussions on, was it slide 30, the timetable? And has appropriate due diligence been done to look at each state's constitution in terms of their winding up processes? Because this seems to circumvent the constitutionality of each state and territory. So that's what my query goes to.
Martin, you already answered it in part. Do you want to have something to say, Shane? Right.
G'day. Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. Has there been due diligence in the constitutions for each state and territory association? Yes, there has. I think the first special resolution was to wind up the company. So that's the first component of it. And then as a part of that, once you've decided that that's what you're going to do, there's another special resolution where you're going to disperse the assets back towards the AusCycling.
Okay. Try again.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, was it Paul? I missed your name, mate. Stephen, sorry. Your point is that that can't happen because the Constitution says if it's wound up, it has to send its assets to another state organisation. It can't send it to a national organisation, correct? That's our understanding. So just to Paul's answer, yes, there has been a body of due diligence done on the constitutions. There are anomalies all over the place here that we've uncovered over the last 6 months. In Tasmania, I think there's 6 of the 16 clubs don't have any cycling members anymore. They go hark back to the days when the pros and the amateurs came together, and they were clubs that ran a single event, a wood chopping event, a athletics event, and a pro cycling event, and they are single purpose promoters. That still 6 of the 16 clubs. They've got votes in Tasmania, and some of them may or may not run bicycle races anymore. They may run an annual wood chopping and athletics carnival. Some of them do run bike races. So there's some unusual things we've come across. The answer to that is, to your question, is you could change the constitution if you wanted to change the constitution. There are some state departments of sport and rec are saying we're fully supportive of this. The New South Wales Department of Sport and Rec have stood up and said we're fully supportive of this. We'll recognise a national organisation as an SSO and we'll fund a national organisation. There are other states that are saying that's hard, and I run a national not-for-profit that was recognised by state governments as an organisation that could receive state funding. There are other state governments, I think like yours, that are saying that's complicated. We source our funds from a particular funding bucket. We'd have to be comfortable that the funds would get spent in the particular state on particular staff and particular activities. So you can't produce an answer that fits everybody's constitution today, that satisfies all the requirements of every state government every day. I think the threshold question is this a good idea? Is this what the sport needs? Is this what we all want to do or not? And if we do, there'll be 20 technical questions. Sometimes it'll relate to constitutions. Sometimes it'll relate to state funding. Sometimes it'll relate to the fact there's a member club that doesn't have anything to do with cycling anymore. But I think the threshold question is, do we want to do this? And then what are the operational, legal, technical barriers? And the Constitution of West Cycle today may be one of those, but I think that's not the first question. The first question is this a good idea? If it is, there'll be a long list of things for the lawyers to solve, but it's all solvable.
Thank you. Okay.
Hi. Sorry, I've got the mic. And you'll never get it off me. Hi, my name is Chris Howard with Northern Beaches Cycling Club. Firstly, we support many of the principles that you're trying to achieve and appreciate all the effort and the road trip itself. Our club supports, our member pathways include Cycling Australia, MTBA, BWA, social membership, and previously a partnership with West Coast Masters. We have a few questions which would help inform our vote. Firstly, one licence for many of our members includes vets. Please outline specifically your strategy for incorporating West Coast Masters licence into your one licence and your timeline for achieving this. That's my first question.
There's been some early discussions with the various masters groups and veterans groups, and in many of the cases they've actually approached us at this stage they're all very interested in the concept, and I think at the minute they're probably in most cases sitting back to see if this gets up and then what it means to them, because they're all, from what I understand, it's not my realm necessarily, but and I'm just relaying information that has come through other sources from this panel, but they've expressed genuine interest in the concept and they're very keen. I think they're just sitting back at the minute to see what it is. And the timeline, the door will be open as soon as we open the door to engage with as many of those organisations that are willing to be involved.
Thanks. My next question is literally a $2 million question. We've advocated for years for a multi-discipline facility, and the local council, the City of Wanneroo, have agreed to a $5.9 million cycling facility. Bit of a plug, you'll find it on northernbeachescycling.com. The next step was to request 1/3 funding from the Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries here in WA. So approximately $2 million to help fund a rider education centre for kids in schools, a criterium track, a BMX track, a footprint for a future outdoor velodrome, an amenities building and a trailhead for an adjacent mountain bike trail that we're hoping leads to an XCO course at Lake Joondalup. In the absence of a state sporting organisation, the state government in WA will not put money, will not contribute money. That's the position today. So this model is a threat to a facility that we've worked so hard for. My question is, will you be clarifying with the Minister for Sport and Rec's office here in WA how state funds can be allocated when their policy is only to fund state sporting organisations? Will you commit to this prior to the November vote? Because it's pretty crucial to our decision. And then I've got just a subsequent question to follow up. In the absence of a state government contribution of $2 million, how does our club get AusCycling to prioritise this over other projects that AusCycling will be voting for? I have a sense that as a club, we will have far less certainty and autonomy in the process of achieving funding for a grassroots facility.
I think I've sort of half answered the first question when I was asking the gentleman's question over here, and that is that other state governments have said that they will recognise a national organisation as a recipient of state grants. Sure, no, I'm just answering the question. So other states have. WA have been very clear that they won't, and that's a huge problem. Our sense is that if this room decided that we did want to do this, and we went to the government, we would find a way. And what we're hearing is that the government's main concern is that this room doesn't want to do this, that WA wants to stay autonomous, and they are an obligation to the people in this room. The funding comes from a particular, I think, lotteries bucket, and the requirement is funding out of that bucket needs to get spent in WA.
You don't understand that. You don't understand the way lotteries work. That's a fundamental problem. Do you want to just jump in for a second? I really hate to cut you off.
Sure, no, go for it.
So I'm Craig Smith-Gander. I was the inaugural chairman of WestCycle. I haven't been involved for some 5 years now, but I really needed to jump on that point. The Lotteries Commission of Western Australia is one of only 2 lotteries entities in the world which is not dictated to its funding by the state government. It has an independent chair and an independent board. So that's one of the anomalies that you don't understand, and you can't understand from the other side of the country. So, but it's clear in what you're considering that you haven't thought about 130 years of federated history in Australia. What you're trying to do is undo, in effect, constitutional conventions of 1890, 91 and 1897, 98. We're a federation, and you've just ripped the federated part of it apart by installing a peak body, which clearly hasn't worked previously, getting rid of the state bodies completely and just saying, that's okay, we'll look after you. And I think that's a fundamental mistake in the way that you've put this together. Now, just to step back a little bit, the first bit of what you're doing is entirely commendable. Bringing the organisations together is clearly a very, very smart thing to do. But to rip apart a federated model is simply not going to work. That's why this room will say no. Because for years and years, Western Australians, and you guys from Queensland should get this as well, Western Australians have heard wise men from the East come here and say those things and then go back and completely ignore them. So I've got a million things I could say, but I won't go and say, but I'm happy to carry this conversation on later. But one thing I will talk about is I'm comparing what you're doing to what happens in Sydney with Rugby Australia. Go and ask the Western Force how much they trust the wise men from the East. And that's the problem you will never get over unless you have a federated element to your model. I think you can go back and have another look at this, include it as a federated model, and then you'll get this room to vote yes. And I'm happy to talk to you about that later.
In my own and I may well be a wise or unwise man from the East. We may all be, who go back with our legs between our tails. It sounds like it's a well-trodden road. We're not Christopher Columbus. But I disagree. I think the Federation, and I suspect you sound like a smart and wise bloke, and I suspect if you sat in my shoes, you'd say the same things. My very, very strong view, and I speak from deep experience, is the Federation is the problem. The Federation is what is holding this sport back. And we can all sit in our backyards and say, we're doing a great job here, and some of the 19 organisations say we're doing a great job. WA says it's doing a 9.5 out of 10 job, and that may well be right. And there are others saying we're really struggling. But if we all sit in our own patches and say independence and autonomy and the federated model is the great defining and important feature of the system, I think you're wrong. And I think the cycling, all the things I said at the beginning, I'm just repeating myself, all the big structural macro problems aren't going to be solved with 19 organisations. And I've spent a fair bit of time now sitting in federated conversations. Forget where I am, I'm just sitting in the federated conversations, and we have a fine history of bickering and arguing and making 19 times 1 equals 3. And we've got away with that for a while. It started to fracture over the last 10 years, and you know, the sport may do well in WA, but the cycling sector at a national level, there's no history of collaboration and respect and working together. The chance of agreeing a national strategic plan, having a national bike ed program, having a national infrastructure policy, it'll just never happen. You guys are doing a crackerjack job here. Other states aren't. But and I may be wrong, mate, but you know, I've run things my whole life, and my diagnosis is the single biggest, the cancer in the bottom of this sector is the federated model, and we need to find a better way, and the people are the main thing. Whilst we've got 19 organisations with management teams really of generalists, and you know, Matt and his team are small and thin and spread over many, many tasks, but when we've got 19 generalist management teams with 19 plans pulling in 19 directions, we're going to underachieve. But I don't think you and I will ever agree. And in the morning I'll fly back east on a well-trodden path.
Where's the middle ground? Like, is there a middle ground? We're talking about 19, you know, of the three divided out. Like, where is the middle ground to say it's national or cycling and the state offices you say, you know,
I think the problem is, I don't think you can, you have to have one management team with all the people on one payroll where you haven't got whatever it is, 90 generalists. You can say to that person, righto, you're in charge of writing a policy on population density and cycling as a transport mode for the future, and you're in charge of a national bike ed program, and you're in charge of pathways, and you're in charge of national competition series. You run the NRS, now run a national enduro series and track series and BMX freestyle series. Until you create until you give people specific jobs and you can pay them properly and they can have career pathways. Part of the problem is all these organisations have generally, you know, 5 to 10 people. They come in for the reason this is a Wednesday night. I've flown here, you've all driven here, we're all here because we love the sport. So I don't get paid, most of us in this room don't get paid. These people come and work in the organisation, take a discount to what they could get paid in the corporate sector or the public sector, work really hard, They're buggered after a couple of years and they get a better off job down the road and go down the road because there's no pathway. So until you can create an organisation with career pathways, but to get everyone employed by one organisation is a big sticking point. There's only two types of capital, human capital and financial capital. And for this to work, you have to have one management team, but then to have one management team and 9 balance sheets, sort of 9 bank accounts, is really hard. So this isn't some sort of unconsultative, flippant proposal. You know? Daniel's here somewhere. Daniel O'Donoghue, g'day mate. He's sat in. I've had a monthly conference call about this for 18 months, and currently, I've got a 60-hour-a-week day job, and I give this 20 hours a week. Like a lot of good people have put a lot of time into this model, and this is the best one we've been able to think about it. And I get why you've got real reservations and think we're just some muppets that flew over from the east with some half-cocked idea. We're not, and it isn't. We're trying hard.
It's trust.
Of course it's trust. It's trust. Sure. Sure. And
yeah. Especially because it's been live streamed. The gentleman's just said it's a matter of trust, and I think that that's something that's been raised quite often, but it's also not trying to, you need to understand that it's not trusting an entity that's existed. It's not a CA takeover or something along those lines. You can't draw on the reputation that Cycling Australia's had in the past, for example. So it's a new entity. So there's a trust issue with a new entity, not one with historical reference points, I suppose. But Daniel?
My name is Daniel O'Donoghue. I'm the president of the Roadshow Cycling Club, and I was the first and last chair of Cycle Sport WA for 5 years. I think, given the journey that we took Cycle Sport on, it would be hypocritical of me to sit here and say that I didn't support this concept, because the reason we wound the association up and rolled it into WestCycle was to achieve that scale and to achieve the very objectives that you've put before us today. But WestCycle has done an enormous job of building and supporting the sport in this state. And the achievements for Matt's small team are significant. And $18 million worth of funding committed by the government to 2 major mountain bike initiatives in the state southwest. The hosting of our first national championships in, I don't know how, well, more than the 10 years that I've been involved as a club president, and when we held the junior road nats last year. The bringing into the fold of both BWA with their 4,000 members and Wamba, which I apologise I don't know too much about, but they've achieved enormous scale. And to go to the point about the winding up of WestCycle, it wouldn't be wound up because it is more than just road and track cycling. It is significantly more than road and track cycling. So it would continue to exist even if AusCycling got up, which I hope it does. Have you considered the alternative, and that is having WestCycle run AusCycling in this state as a contracted entity? That then preserves your state funding, the significant state funding through OSP, operational sustainability funding, the money that they've committed to facilities. I mean, they've just put last year over $3 million into our velodrome, our only major cycling facility. The funding that they've put into mountain biking, and then the money that we're sure is going to come out of this particular endeavour. Is that something that you've considered?
Yes, I had a conversation with another state yesterday who said, why don't you just merge the 3 NSOs and then replicate in each state WestCycle? So merge the road and track and the BMX entities in each state. And my answer to that is, yeah, you could do that, but you then spend all of next year, instead of doing one transaction, like these are complicated legally, financially and emotionally, trust. So you spend next year doing 9 transactions, create 9 new co's, roll Cycling Victoria, Cycling BMX Victoria into one entity, so you spend, and nationally do the same. So next year you do 9 complicated transactions, and then you're still left with 9 balance sheets and 9 management teams and 9 strategies, and you try and create, if you read the Sport Australia governance principles, the first chapter's on aligned behaviours, then it talks about 1 management team, then it talks about 1 structure. You've still got to try and create aligned behaviours between 9 organisations pulling in 9 directions. Now that's a Frankenstein, you know. Is it a Frankenstein that can win a marathon, or is it a Frankenstein that goes off the rails? I don't know, but it's not the optimal model, and you spend...
Can I put to you that what really, and I say this as a proud West Australian, I don't really give a shit what happens in the other states.
I get that impression this evening.
That if we were to roll out of WestCycle, it would be to their detriment and to ours. And this has been a 5-year journey for us. We went from probably being in a position where we felt quite aggrieved at the potential to, lose our independence and become part of WestCycle, but we got there in the end. That's been a 5-year journey. So I don't think that's going to happen in the other states in the time frame that we've been presented. But certainly I think it's an option for AusCycle to consider for WestCycle as part of maybe the journey towards getting towards where you have a state office here. But I think certainly it solves a lot of problems for you, and probably, I know, would guarantee my vote.
I'll let the mountain bikers, also Lee and Shane, talk about the fact that they're unfederated, and that's a problem because it involves them rejoining something that they've successfully got away from.
It's not an NSO here though, Duncan, it's a contracted arrangement.
Sure, but a gentleman over here said, is it a step in the right direction, going to having 8 SSOs and an NSO? And we have thought about this at great length, but it involves doing 9 transactions, and it doesn't create many national solutions. You still won't end up with, I know, deep in my gut, you won't end up with a national bike ed program. You won't end up with cohesive national pathways. Steve Drake runs CA. He unfortunately couldn't be here tonight for very good personal reasons, but he would spend 30% of his time negotiating issues amongst the Federation, and you would go through 12 months of pain and suffering to do 9 financially, legally and emotionally and culturally complicated mergers, and you would still end up with a system where 1/3 of the intellectual and emotional energy of the people in the system would be negotiating with each other, finding lowest common denominator policy and operational outcomes. So is it an acceptable outcome, or is it just change rather than reform? Having lived in the federated model, which I have fundamental problems with for the last 12 months, you can see the emotional scar tissue of trying to negotiate federated solutions. I think it's change rather than reform.
Well, could you just hold them up, because someone's just been waiting patiently. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Daniel Harvey, South Perth Rouleurs, and on the Road Sport Advisory Council at WestCycle. Thanks for all your work. It's I recognise from my perspective and a personal comment the pain of what it means to make change. I think I speak for my club and for many of the clubs here that things like one licensing system and streamlining things, we're all for it. And I think you probably want to reflect on the comments you get tonight, which is the things we like we don't say a lot about, the things that are problematic you're going to hear more about, and that's usually the way it goes. If I take into the question with a bit of history, Dan talked a second ago about WestCycle. One of the things that if you go back a few years before that, the devil's in the detail of governance. The clubs used their own personal hard cash to take the organisation to court in order to sort out governance issues. Right? That's the history and the pain that the local organisations faced. So you'll forgive us if some of the questions that we bring to you, and certainly the questions that I'll ask, are governance related. How do we solve problems? Because I love the pipe dream, and I'm fully supportive of bringing everyone together, having national agendas. We need to get there. The challenge for me is what does the process look like to get there? So I guess my first question is, the timetables you've put up are pretty tight. They don't really look like consultation and deliberation. So my questions are around the operational model, the governance model, the proposed draft constitution and the initial strategic plan. What is the plan to get those documents refined? So taking our feedback here today, refining that, bringing that back to the various members. Can we actually do that in a consultative way before a proposed date of November for voting on? That process question, if you could.
From a process viewpoint, there's been a significant amount of work done and to get to this point, and I would suggest that the three organisations presenting this model around the country are comfortable with the model as it is presented to put before our members for them to have the say on whether it's accepted or not. Ultimately, they're the majority of, they will speak the loudest. We've presented it, we've spent a lot of time in developing it, and it's something that we've agreed collectively to put before our members. Through the process of consultation with the workshops that we've had in the Roadshow, we've been taking a lot of the feedback and comments on board and looking at ways that we can improve what comes out of from those into the future state or the proposal of the organisation. Not in every case can we deliver what's been requested, but where we can, we're certainly looking to make improvements to that model. When we talk about getting to a vote point, that's a first step in a long process. So we expect that it'll take 12 to 18 months to actually bring about the full operational model and synergies and process documents and procedures and everything into the AusCycling organisation. But the first step is to go and ask our members if this is what they want collectively and see if that's what the majority want or don't want. From that point, then we will start to be able to have discussions with all the various stakeholders at club and club in some cases, members in other cases, state and territory organisations, their boards, their workforces, so that we can start to develop the operational models and ensure that we do develop operational plans and procedures and structures that are relevant to the various regional and jurisdictions, but also then collectively can be used and combined to form the national operational models and planning. So it's a process that's going to take a considerable amount of time, but we can't go and do that today. If we went out and wrote all these plans and strategic documents and all that as three groups, we'd be criticised for being very presumptuous and just doing this. This is reliant on the contributions of everybody who comes into it as a stakeholder to help form the operation and the future strategies and direction that the organisation takes. It's fundamental that they contribute to that process. So by not having those documents, we then get criticised for not having those documents. So, but we're more prepared to take that criticism because we believe that that's where the value really comes from.
Quick comment just in response. I really suggest that doing that sounds very much like a take it or leave it answer. And if I could offer the view that with the wise men from the East comment, if the way we begin is a take it or leave it, what that says to me is that the way we will continue is take it or leave it. And so honestly, that feels like a concern. So for example, the Constitution has a set of objects in there. They reflect, at the moment, a very UCI race-centric set of things. And if you go back and have a look at the objects of our individual clubs, if you have a look at the objects of the West Cycle, if you have a look at the objects of Bicycling WA, they reflect some of the stuff that you've talked about, which is community, engagement, transport. The Constitution doesn't. And so it seems to me that if you're forcing that on people as a take it or leave it at the beginning, that says to us, in the future, it will be the same. And after you've given up all your assets, after you've given up your vote, it feels like that. So in my way of thinking, if you ask the clubs and that to vote today or in November on an intention that says we agree on a set of things, so we're not actually giving it away, but we're entering an MOU with an intention to resolve certain things, I think in principle lots of clubs are for it. if you ask the clubs in WA to give up everything on the 21st of November, which is what your type of saying, because we lose most of the vote after that, that's a lot more difficult pill to swallow from my point of view.
Can I just talk about the process? This process, because we've tried to design a slow and collaborative process. It started in February last year when the chair and the CEO of the three disciplines met for the first time. We then met monthly in February, March, April of last year. Went from we've never met each other and we have no history of talking to talking a lot. In May, June last year, we decided there was enough goodwill and intention that we needed to get stuck into the detail and needed some resources. That led to the EY report. EY spent 5 months, I think doing it, and these consulting reports are never perfect, but they spoke to all the state organisations, they interviewed a whole lot of club presidents. You've got finite funding budgets, but they did as much as you can do when you get a firm like that for 4 or 5 months and a finite funding budget. We got to the end of that and decided that their recommendation was the only, if you take a view on federation, the only plausible, implementable, functional model. And so we went on a roadshow around the country. I came here, I don't think Steve Drake came with me, but I came here and met with the board of WestCycle and had dinner in Cottesloe. So we all went round the states meeting the state boards. The group of presidents and CEOs then decided that there was a concept that had needed real work and meat put on the bones. Throughout all of that, the 19 organisations continued to meet monthly. We then engaged the Sports Commission and went from a 10-page deck of slides to this. That took 3 or 4 months. We got that done in May or June of this year. Continue to have a lot of discussions with clubs on the way through. I talk to a club president on a daily basis. Most of us would. And then in July, decided to we organised 3 workshops. We got all of road and track together nationally. So we had probably 50 people in the room in Sydney on a Saturday. Then we got all of BMX together, all the states. Again, another 50 or 60 people on a Sunday. We then went to Brisbane and got all of mountain bike, a lot of mountain bike clubs, a lot of people from WA together there, and then decided to come on these road shows. But this is our last road show. We've been to every cap city. Most of us are volunteers. And during the course of that time, there's a lot of change. We've had 3 presidents in WA, 2 in New South Wales, 2 in Queensland. And because most of us are volunteers and we work hard, there's a lot of churn at a leadership level. So when you let processes like this has taken 1.5 years to get to here. And you're forever bringing people along on the journey, and there's a lot of leadership change. So I know what it looks like. We've just arrived and said, huge issue, you've got 8 weeks, take it or leave it. It wasn't designed that way. I don't actually think it has been executed that way. It has been set up to be a slow and collaborative process, and the degree of change you have at a leadership level makes it really hard.
Just before we go to a question in the room, I've just got a couple from online. I'm going to start with a comment from Liam McGowan. It's a question as well as a comment. He says, you talked about the need for increasing the number of members to make ourselves attractive to corporate sponsors. Why not have a free registration for advocacy? This would help the relevance of AusCycling with non-members and help with the transitional membership we experience. I mean, it's more of a statement, but it seems like a pretty sound idea. Any comment, anyone?
I think we've got a broad objective. I think historically these organisations have been addicted to government. I spent 6 years working in Indigenous affairs, and Indigenous organisations are generally addicted to government funding. And I think sport is addicted to government funding and membership funding, and when things go wrong, you tend to slug the members. So I think our objective should be to make membership as cheap as possible. If there comes a point in time we can get it down to $10, great. Should you have cheaper memberships for people who ride less and go to capitation models where you're swiping a card and paying money to race, and people who are there for other reasons, like the traditional bicycle network member over east, who are there for advocacy reasons, sure, I think that's a place we should absolutely head.
He's also suggesting that that be free, and I mean it's essentially just building the database, building the membership base. It's an
idea that requires thinking about.
Up. Could you pass the microphone, please? I'm just going to get a couple. Vanessa H has asked the question quite often, so and she's not yet been answered. So she says, how are events improved and bolstered when the money spent on events is less in year 2 and 3? What events are being reduced or cut on the forecast P&L in year 2 and 3? There is expenses decrease of around 900,000 on events. So it appears you're spending less on events, or are you spending on a specific event in year 1?
It's a specific event.
It is a specific event, and that is?
It's one out of the road walk, but I don't know what it is. So.
It relates to the road worlds.
No, it's one out of...
Sorry.
Apologies. It relates to a specific event or a couple of specific events in year 1. I don't know what that is exactly because I didn't do all that detail on the modelling, but I know it relates to 1 or 2 specific events. Whilst it's lower in those 2nd and 3rd years, there's no reason why they're dynamic budgets. If there are events that are awarded or funded and need to be supported, you'll just see the budgets lift in conjunction with those new event attractions that have been awarded. So it's just based on what we knew was allowed for in that first year.
Okay. Someone asks, how many total votes are there? In other words, if a club gets 4 votes, what does that mean in the total scheme of things?
We'll take that one on note because we'll have to go through every club. I'm sorry, the 520 clubs, and we'll have to then determine what the pool is. But we'll take that on notice and we'll put that up on I'm sorry, I can't answer it right now, but I don't want to guess, so we'll work it out for you.
Okay. Neil Hackett's posed a few questions. One is, did Western Australia, New South Wales and Tasmania agree to the model proposed? You said, and in quotes, all states, but those 3 have expressed objection to the model proposed. Is there an answer to that?
I think it's like listening to pollsters leading into an election. There's certainly large pockets of vocal opposition. I'm also getting calls saying, stay the course because there's a silent positive majority. So I think there are people who think there are locked and loaded outcomes in some states. They're individual views. We will see on the day.
Everything felt fairly positive in Launceston on Monday night.
Indeed it did.
Neil also asked, will the states be represented on the board or just on the advisory committee?
You can't have a board where every state is represented and every discipline's represented and you've got a proper skills matrix. So no, not every state. You can't guarantee in a constitution that every state will have someone domiciled in that state on the board. It needs to be a good, proper, balanced board that should reflect state interests, discipline interests and broader skills.
Okay.
The answer is no.
Apologies to those in the room, but there are a lot of people who couldn't make it tonight. Matt Butterworth says the BMX WA board currently runs events with specialised portfolios to effectively coordinate these events. How will the new advisory board ensure the same event quality and personnel once these board members are made redundant?
Like most of our sports, our events are run with volunteers. Volunteers are the most valuable resource in our sport. Without them, our sports generally don't operate. At an operational level for events, Matt, that's not going to change. The people that are doing the jobs today are going to continue to do the jobs. They just might have a different reporting structure. AusCycling.
There's a fairly general question, but Jared asks, why would I want to buy a licence to ride in the bush? Sorry, can't help you there, Jared. So, okay, it's good to have a bit of, maybe to feel part of a community, to want to see cycling prosper, you know, just generally why we're in the room, perhaps.
Hello, my name's Helen Sadler. I have never intentionally worn lycra on a bike. Thank you very much for all your hard work as volunteers. I really respect that and the time you've taken to come over here. It will take a lot of trust to get what you anticipate having, and I really appreciate that you have acknowledged how well WestCycle's been done and what a great model that is. And I think that's possibly why you're experiencing some resistance now, because a lot of trust has been built up, and so we feel like we've got a lot to lose. So my background is health. I'm a GP, but I also came onto the board of Bicycling WA as a non-lycra cyclist to move that conversation along, and WestCycle's done a fabulous job about contributing to further move that along. So they have a model where they have non-lycra riding
Is that a
board
category?
members.
Is non-lycra a specific category? Is there something wrong with riding in
You're looking
clothing?
at it. So it's just, and look, I really respect people who do ride in lycra as well, but it's not about that. But what it is about is actually having a governance model which actually acknowledges that the history of bike riding started as transport, and that if you guys want to be really, really successful with regard to riding bikes at a competitive level, that we've actually got to make sure that that conversation is represented at a national level and at a state level, and that you probably need to have a different look at your governance structure so that you have representation at a board level of people who possibly don't even ride a bike, so that you avoid the groupthink that is often prevalent. And I really support the comments of the gentleman, I apologise, I can't remember your name, Daniel, thank you Daniel, saying that maybe looking at what we've got in common and what everyone's supporting in your model, and maybe even though it's going to be tricky, slowing things down slightly to agree on what we agree on, and then build trust on the areas which need to be changed, so that we don't end up actually with a do or die model, which might mean that everyone goes back to their corners, because BWA struggled to acknowledge the strength that would come from joining WestCycle, and there was a bit of pain in that, and that didn't actually fully occur while I was on the board. But now I'd have to say that Matt and his great team spend about 70% of their time and energy on advocacy in all areas, and I think there's a big risk if you look at it purely from a sporting model that we're going to lose that. They've got a huge amount of trust with the politicians and the people who are in state, in local and state government, and that means that they get a lot done. It also means that we're getting funding. So I'd really like you to carefully think about all those things and think what we've got in common and what can be done to move towards success and build on trust, rather than have a all-in or all-out situation in November, which could be leaving us all a bit battered and bruised. Thank you.
Great comment. Just on that, there's been quite a strong consultation process with We Ride Australia, which has got a strong voice in the non-lycra set, and I think they're actually on a study tour in Canada at the moment, led by Stephen Hodge in Canberra, and he may have a racing background, but he's also probably the biggest proponent of trying to get bicycles as commuting objects in the country, and he's doing a fantastic job. And from my understanding, you've had quite a lot of dialogue with him, is that right? So, I mean, it's not that that's being ignored at all, but I take your point, and I think it's really valid one to raise, so thank you. Got another question at the back of the room.
So mine was around the thing I posted on Facebook about the
Could I just get your name?
Liam.
Sorry.
So if you had, I guess, free registration just for people who are just riding casually and just commuting and stuff, who don't really want the license, or don't want the insurance component of it, which is the $80, I guess, for the ride insurance. you'd increase your membership, that would actually be able to go to government and go, look, we need funding, we need all this stuff. It's not, yeah, at the moment you said you've got 55,000 people in Australia registered with Cycling Australia. You've got 500,000 or whatever that ride regularly. Just creating a register of people would actually, you know, make yourself attractive to sponsorship from corporations and such. That's all.
Allowed to say I agree, but I agree.
Well, go for it. Be happy. We're all trying to get this thing underway. We're just trying to come together. Cycling has a long history of disputes amongst particular niches, and I think that one of the things that's happening today is that we're trying to break those barriers down. So please say you agree if you agree, if I could be so bold.
And for those who are not aware, Mountain Bike Australia's membership is about 30% participation. So, you know, we've built that up in the last couple of years because we have realised that there are a very large number of people who don't want to race. They still want to be part of a club, and some of them actually just want to be individual members, but they do associate with being a mountain biker. You know, they do want to go out onto the trails. You know, they do get some insurance for that, and that's potentially all that they're drawing on, and a sense of community or you know, a group that they're riding with.
Hi, my name's Kay Horton. I am from the Wanneroo BMX Club. I've been involved with the sport for about 28 years. Been around a long time. Firstly as a parent, never as a rider, but now as an official and as part of the committee and governing bodies. Been involved with BMX Sports WA as well. My concern generally is around the rush that seems to be behind this push. In the presentation slide, you actually said that the quality of the outcome trumps the speed of the implementation. And what I feel is we found out about this OneCycling or AusCycling idea secondhand from Matt from WestCycle. We weren't approached directly initially. And then a lot of information has come out really quickly. And we keep hearing words like a leap of faith, you have to trust us. There doesn't seem to be a thorough strategic plan or financial management plan. There are no KPIs that I've seen. We don't know what the level of success is. Is it that all the people who are riding to work every day become members of AusCycling, or what's the actual KPIs involved in this? What concerns me is BMX Western Australia has a substantial amount of money in the bank, and if this goes through, we would be asked to hand that substantial amount of money over with no idea at this stage of how that would be used other than to pay an increase in employees and other perhaps events. If I walked into a bank and said, can you give me a couple of $1 million? I've got a really good idea. It's altruistic. It's going to be good for everybody. You'll love it. Don't know the details of it just yet. Still working those out. Need to kind of get my head around those. But I promise you it'll be really good. I doubt very much that a bank would say, okay, well, I'll write you a cheque. And that's how I feel involved in this sport, that we're being asked to basically write a cheque for something that has no substantial plan attached to it, other than the things that are benefits that we already experience in the state anyway, in terms of event running. Because of our isolation, we've had to. So I don't see, it's not a matter of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. That's not what this is about. But I feel that the time frame that you've given us, which my understanding is that Sports Australia have said that if this deal doesn't go through by the 1st of January, they will withdraw their offer of funding the debt that Cycling Australia is in. And that's why there is this imperative behind it. I feel that we need to have more detail before we can make an informed and conscious decision about whether this is something that we want or not.
I've discussed the timetable before. Some states, and the fact it's been going for 18 months, some states have been more welcoming than others. You know, I sat in South Australia in a pub for about 4 hours with the president pretty much of every club in South Australia 12 months ago and talked through it. So, yeah, I understand that, but it's an 18-month process, and we've tried there are a lot of, there's 558 clubs, 55,000 members, 19 boards. Now, EY have talked to lots of people. Like we have done our best to move slowly and be collaboratively, and knew we would be criticised for not doing enough of that. So we've done our level best. Can I? Yeah, I mean, some states we were literally locked out of. We were told by the state board we couldn't come and meet with the clubs until... No, WA wasn't one of those. But my point is there have been different levels of welcomeness. On the detail point, I feel like there is a fair bit of detail. Now, there's a full org chart, full financial model, draft strategic financial plan. Strategic plan, if you dig through that website, I've done a lot of transactions, and there is actually all that meat on the bones. You can see every position, every human being in an org chart. We've been having Zoom conference calls for members of state boards who want to have a 1 hour tutorial looking through the financial model, draft strat plan, as I said. So I think if you drill into the detail, spend a lot of time on that website, put your hand up, there is actually, I think there's genuinely there's enough information for you to make a really informed decision.
We're already in a position where we've had Western Australia's constitution raised to nothing, where whatever information is on the website, that's not relevant to our constitution. So I feel like there's not enough action. Like I get the position that with 18 months work, it's very difficult to get that, but there's still not enough work done for us to be able to say, this is great, this is what it's going to look like, this is what we can expect from it as a club. For instance, we hand over, Western Australia hands over, all of their, So for example, Western Australia hands over all of their funds. Next year we have a race series that's run by our board at the moment, and estate titles. So where does the funding come to hold those events? Do we then have to go back to the Australian body and say, okay, well, we need X amount of dollars to run this event or these events, we need this amount of staff on the ground to run that event? Those are the things that I think aren't structured enough at this stage to be able to make an informed decision.
And so we haven't shown it there, but we've talked about it in a number of times, is you currently have a budget, and you would have a 12-month budget, and you would set that, and I'm not sure when you set that, if you set that in June, you set that in January, but you set an annual budget. You would set that for next year, and that would not change. So that still gets approved, and that enables you, and you would have planned out your events, your staffing plans, and put some assumptions around there about what income you would get from any grants or sponsorship or anything like that. So that doesn't change. You still have that, and you would still be given that. And if you needed more, then that would be a conversation that you would have to have. So that doesn't change, and we can't show that level of detail there. But we've talked about that that on day one it will feel like the day beforehand, because you already have that now. That's not being removed. I'm sorry? No, we don't. we will on.
It was
on
suggested that the
Q2
balance
in the
sheet would be
new-
lost,
yes,
and Lee's now going to respond. I'm going to try and do this with the microphone because just yelling out doesn't really help the cause. Sorry, do you want to say that? Can I just repeat what you said? Could you just say it one more time? The suggestion is that they don't have a balance sheet, that the balance sheet has been taken off them. Right. Okay. This is just for the online feed. There's a gentleman over here with a question.
Listen, my question probably goes towards advocacy more than anything else. My name's Andrew. I'm just a BWA or AusCycling member now. I've had some experience of unity governance through the WA Heart Foundation. Similar model was put up to move to a national body. All the states were state bodies were dissolved, with promises of programs to be continued, advocacy to continue, and everything else. Across the line, there were obviously job cuts and that for which were essential along the way. But the biggest loser of that was advocacy. Now here in WA, there's very little state and community advocacy going for the programs which are evolving from the WA branch. My question to you guys is, what guarantees can you give me as a BWA or as a Simply Cycling member that the advocacy which has been built up, especially over the past 4 or 5 years, and is really beginning to gain traction here in WA with some tremendous results, what guarantees can you give me that that is going to continue with a national body as opposed to a state body where somebody is running around going to all the meetings week in, week out, day in, day out, nights, days? How's that going to affect what's happening here in WA?
It's a good question. Looking at the achievements that have been made here, what's not to say that under the AusCycling model, the WA wouldn't be the leading example and be leading the rest of the country in how to do advocacy. I think you've got to look at the strengths and where achievements have been made and where that can be shared across the organisation to the best. This model is not about contraction or changing. It's about growing and enabling. But like everything in business, you just can't give a guarantee on every little piece of an organisation. But certainly we would look to the West, really, to lead the East on how to do advocacy, across that organisation.
The follow-up question is, who here on the ground is going to be here to do that work in WA?
We don't anticipate any change to your existing workforce in WA. In fact, we would hope to see an increase in the workforce to handle an increased membership base. So we don't see any change to that. The people who do it today, provided they choose to work and join AusCycle, would be doing that work tomorrow. They'll be guaranteed a position, but the individual makes a choice if they come across.
Thanks very much. We've got a question from someone who's been patiently waiting all evening.
Hi, I'm Margaret McRoy. I've been involved in advocacy in WA for about 7 years. Sorry, can you hear me? Yep.
Just hold it up.
Sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah. Closer? Okay.
Yep.
First of all, I want to reiterate that, I am all for the one cycling prospect of having a unified model. This is why WAMBA amalgamated or joined WestCycle and so the other entities, because we all recognise that we can't do it on our own and we need to, step up and do it together. But in all the conversations, everyone here from the East is giving us accolades that we are doing it really well in WA. Okay, on 3 occasions, we are doing it well in WA. So we don't need the wise men to the East coming over and telling us how to do it. We actually want to remain and do it ourselves. So another thing I wanted to sort of ask, it's about the constitution of WestCycle. So if we had to change our constitution, that would have to go to a vote, a members' vote. So if the members vote against transferring the funds, then does AusCycle then have a contingency? Would they then readdress their position and evaluate their position towards WestCycle?
Can you just repeat that question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, if we as members voted against transferring the funds to the entity of AusCycle and keep the funds to ourselves, would you then reassess your position with WestCycle as becoming part of your entity rather than dissolving WestCycle?
It would be, well, we can't dissolve WestCycle, that's a choice of your members anyway.
Well, forcing us to dissolve it.
It's a choice of your members. Obviously, depending on what the votes are, and we don't know what that will look like across the entire country with all the different entities, once that's all determined and we see what the outcome of that is, obviously then we would have to look at having further discussions to work out what are the individual situations and where they're at. If that was a decision that was made in WestCycle, we would obviously have to have a discussion. I guess the first question is your decision to join AusCycle or is it to remain outside? And they're two different types of discussion, but no doors are closed. We need to go through that process and then we would have those further discussions. The strength of the model is with everybody involved. The strength of what the proposal is everybody involved, and probably in versions 2, 3 and 4 it incorporates the advocacy bodies that exist in other states and the masters and the vets to strengthen the entire sport across the whole sector. But there's lots of discussions, I'm sure, that will come out of the outcomes of the votes.
That's all I have. Thank you.
My question is that if some of the state bodies are going to be put under AusCycle, what would the national education programs like? Because at the moment, we currently have no structure at a grassroots level that gets cycling in to kids' minds at a young age. I'm talking like 5 or 6 here. You talked about AusCycling briefly early on. They're getting their sport into the school's curriculum really early on. We're talking like we've got like little kids playing at the moment. And I've just freshly come out of high school, so I'm not seeing cycling in a school curriculum until year 10, and even then it's only an elective. So and by the time they reach year 10, most kids unfortunately are either choosing ATAR or something else. So we're not getting it in there at the critical time. Do AusCycle have a strategy of putting people on the ground and getting it in at grassroots?
Great question.
In one of the workshops, it was one of the tasks that we talked about collectively was how do we devise some of these programs, what's important, and we did just some sort of brain dumps on that. So there's some work that's been done around concepts of how that could be done, and in coming weeks we'll share some of that back as it's all collated. But to answer your question, I think there's many ways you can go, and one of the ways I would be professing to go is to create a set of principles and to facilitate a network of presenters that can get into schools and do those things. I don't see that we're going to go out and employ a whole bunch of people from a corporate office or whatever it would be. You would look to use existing networks and existing programs to enhance that, but you would be working also to lobby schools and get the sport taken up at earlier ages. And that's where, obviously friends from BMX have a lot of experience in dealing with kids getting just started on a bike early. And hopefully through the learnings that they have, we can try and extend that into the schools. But it's a development program that we've started to have early discussions with. We'll look at how we get funding. It's about promotion as much as it is about the delivery. It's about getting people aware of it, getting people excited about it, finding champions within environments who want to lead those programs or within schools who want to take those programs on. But we need to do quite a bit of work on it.
I just have one more question.
Can you just give us your name? Because
Sorry, I'm Aaron from the Midland Cycle Club.
Thanks.
I work at a bike store in Belmont, which is not necessarily the best area financially off. I had a kid come in the other day, and this really, really broke my heart. They wanted to get into cycling, and they wanted to get into road cycling. Now, the cheapest bike that you can now get is $1,000 for, like, that's 8-speed Claris, like the lowest of the lows you can get. Now, I understand that AusCycle can't facilitate the companies bring their prices down. The companies set their prices, and that's fine. But I nearly had that child over the line to buy the bike and get them into cycling. But what the parent couldn't justify was the license, which I understand you guys are bringing down. But having to pay for every race, like I know when I go to Peel, it's $20 every race. You race 3 or 4 times a season, that's $100. But I can go play football for, $100 a season. I pay my rego. Now I'm only racing 4 times in a year, but I can go play a season of football for 18 games. So is there a strategy within AusCycle to bring the prices down per race? And I know $20 here in WA is the cheapest that you can race, because it's really hurting people not getting into the sport because you have to pay every time you race.
It's a good point, but I had a hit of tennis with my 9-year-old on the weekend. It cost me $25 to hire the court. So I mean, unfortunately, there are costs, but I mean, I'm not the one to respond, but just the...
Look, it's a really good question, and it's I'm not sure exactly the answer, because a lot of those costs, and I'm not trying to pass blame, are costs inherent to clubs to deliver events. Are there ways with feedback that we can improve resources that might be able to limit or help reduce some of those costs? Hopefully, but we need to understand what those are and where we can be effective in helping that. But it's a very valid point.
This sort of came up in Launceston on Monday as well, and we were talking about, and I made a point about the notion of bringing industry involved. Of all of the people who have been very vocal during the presentation, during the road shows, we've heard very little from industry, but it's my hope, and I've had a lot of contact with industry over the last 25 years in Australia for the cycling world. And if you look at some track clubs will have bikes that can be loaned simply as that. And now with the coming together of the disciplines, it's sort of, I see it being an opportunity to present it to industry to try and encourage an opportunity for bikes across the range of disciplines. And it might be where you can go to some of the areas where money isn't quite as accessible as it is elsewhere, and try to encourage some sponsorship that could ignite the enthusiasm of cyclists, not for just track cycling or just BMX or just mountain bike or road, but all four, and that would be something that I think would hold appeal for the manufacturers, because ultimately then they're exposing their wares to potential clients in the future. So, I mean, it's which comes first though, if you know what I mean. But there has to be merit in bringing all of the disciplines together to try and encourage the industry into action as well.
Good evening, Chris Prattley, President Track Cycling WA. I'm a huge fan of the concept of bringing everyone together, and the single licence I think is a wonderful thing. I've been a massive fan and supporter of it here in WA. I am an ex-Eastern Stater, and I understand that these problems date back decades or centuries. However, one of the issues I have in my club is the majority of my members don't race. We would love to see a rethinking of the entire licence structure to give the ability to have someone as a member with a low level of insurance and selectively have a race licence for major events, where you'll get 1 or 2 major events per year, and especially with this Zwift and other online challenges we've got for the other sports and the perceived dangers of road cycling, with the media hype about all this war on the roads and other garbage. to have the ability to have someone say that I want to race once in January, once in July, and once in December. I think that would be an awesome ability to bring that out across the disciplines so that I can have one of my members race. We've got a major event on Friday night, and then they can go and do national mountain bike championships or something like that.
Yeah, look, with the licence structure that's been, or the membership structure that's been proposed, there'll be things such as the public liability only cover that exists across a couple of them now for those people who just want that. There are the opportunities for day licences or schemes of day licences, which is similar to what you're talking about creating that opportunity for people to get involved. I would like to see a continuation of the MTBA program around trialling or free trial for a period. So we will look at all those options. We just initially put out the core structure of the membership.
But the day licence is a single one-off thing. You don't get to repeat. What my members would like to see is the ability to select when they want to race.
Yeah, we agree with that, but the day licences you can choose to buy on anything, whether it becomes a single day licence or a pack of 3 that you can pull out of your pocket whenever you want to, those things will still be confirmed. But we are looking at creating options that allow access like that.
Hi, Michael Breakin from Peel District Cycling. My question's got a couple of parts to it. I haven't been able to find any information on what sort of percentage of numbers you're going to need to actually carry this, right? Are we talking 80% of the national numbers? Is that going to be split by states? I guess, you know, obviously WA seems to be a little bit more resistant to this than other states. So is it going to be a state-by-state based, or is it just going to be, you know, a whole homogenous, take each club as a club, take their votes, and then apply that as a whole? So I'll let you answer that first, and then I'll get to the second part.
Okay, so in BMX, I'll address that one first, on the basis that to get this across line at an NSO level, really, which is you need 6 of the 8 state and territory organisations to vote it through. At the and that will be determined by the clubs voting and giving direction to the various state organisations, and that's 75% again of the clubs within those jurisdictions. Similar arrangement for most of the states and territories for CA, or cycling, road and track. In ACT it'll be individual member votes rather than club to direct the state organisation, and in West Cycle it's the 6 member organisations that have the voting. In the mountain bike or the MTBA world, it'll be 75% of the members, individual members throughout the country who vote. So there's currently a bit over 17,000 members, so all will be invited to vote. The number that vote either in person or by proxy, it'll be 75% of the total votes received. So to get this up, the rationale could be that either one or the two, two of the 3 disciplines get the majority in order, and then they will look to form AusCycling. There could be a situation where some states in the other discipline had voted for it and others had not, and depending on how that all plays out, they, ultimately in the model, because it is club owned, if AusCycling is formed by any one of the 3 through a majority, clubs from the discipline that didn't accept it have the right to join AusCycling, and so do individual members. Have I answered your question?
For that part, yeah. I guess the other side of that is, I suppose, around the supposed threats of if a particular state or, a body doesn't agree to joining to AusCycle, right, that there was talk about being excluded at a national level. Right,
okay.
So,
yeah,
say one state, had some people or some organisations say yes they would, but then don't carry the majority.
Mm-hmm.
What happens in that regard?
Okay, so to answer, we'll respect the vote either way, a yes or a no vote, be it at national or be it at a state or territory organisation. That's the right of the members of those organisations to vote. If a discipline or a state chooses not to vote, just like today, if you wish to participate in national championships or represent your country, to be a member of the national federation that is recognised internationally. If AusCycling is formed and it is the recognised national organisation or national federation, you would need to be a member of that. But you can join independently as a club if your state or organisation voted no, and the same as an individual. So it's no different theoretically than it is today on that basis. You need to be a member of the National Federation.
Hey guys, Leighton Pratt. I'm the current president of Coburn BMX Club, also a member of Peel District Cycling and Cycling Australia. Look, just in regards to the voting that you had up on the slide before, I understand that at Coburn BMX, 80% of our members are more worried about if there's red icy poles in the canteen than they are on voting for AusCycle. The South Perth Rulers, their member base is going to be the complete opposite. In regards to the voting, will non-financial members be counted in that vote? Numbers up to get their voting numbers up. And the other question would be, who is voting on behalf of our 80% 10-year-olds? Is it the parents that will be voting? Will they be non-financial members and voting on the child's behalf?
Martin, can you?
So in terms of your junior members, are you saying that once AusCycling was formed, in terms of that that talking about
the leading to voting
in terms of
yep.
Oh, okay. Well, at a club level, if there's a vote at a club level, that is a matter for the at that level, and at a state level, then it becomes the clubs that are voting. So at your club, if you want to have a person for the kids, that's fine. That's something that's up to you at a club level.
So regardless of whether they're members or not, it'll be the parents that vote on behalf of their child.
Hi, Paul Avery. I'm on the West Board, so I want to come back to a couple of comments about transport and advocacy. Looking at the images on the wall, I'm looking at the glossy video, the advisory boards, everything in there was about sport. It was about aiming to get young kids through to elite level training and to be successful in sport. So the question was asked about how we've been very successful in WA with advocacy. We want to maintain that, and the question was asked, how would we do that? How would that happen on the ground? And you said, okay, well, the people that are doing it now will still be here on the ground. State government in WA has made it very clear that if this a very large volume of funding to AusCycle and to those sorts of activities would be at risk. Most of the funding that's coming in, so $700,000 at least. You're asking us to trust you on a lot of stuff. Given that advocacy has been really successful, are you prepared to go beyond trust us to give some guarantees about how long you'll cross-subsidise that sort of advocacy activity here if that funding is pulled in WA?
That funding can't go. Our impression is if this room wanted to come into AusCycling, and we undertook that funding was only spent to pay the salaries of people who are based in that we could convince the government to do otherwise. If the government wouldn't do that, could AusCycling pick up that cost for a period of time? Possibly, we haven't modelled that, but my gut instinct is if commitments were given to maintain that workforce and to have that workforce in WA, and this room cohesively went to the West Australian government, those funding envelopes would stay in place as they range of different solutions. In some states, because the organisations, state-based funding is tied to membership numbers, so in some states they're actually going to get rewarded from coming together because BMX and Road and Track come together, they're eligible for. There's a solution here. My glass half full point is that the narrative, the stream of questions is how do we make sure that the good advocacy work that's being done on the ground today doesn't dissipate? You know, my answer has been where there are centres of excellence around the country, and I listed some of the get-go, junior development in New South Wales, mountain bike trail funding in Derby and Tasmania, where there's centres of excellence. It's about how you pick them up and nationalise it, and I think WA does lead the country in advocacy and in funding for participation in transport and infrastructure, and my worry isn't how do you preserve what's happening in WA, it's how do you maintain what's happening in WA and teach the rest of the country. I think that's sort of the harder to get to glass half full view of the issue.
It should be right.
Alex Wade, I'm from WestCycle as well. I've got a couple of questions, but my first one is I've been doing a little bit of maths on Shane's thing about what our voting rights would be here in WA, and I've come up with about 0.1% per club. Does that sound accurate based on, so every club in WA would influence about 0.1% of the national vote?
I need to do the math.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And I also want to understand more about what the future would look like under this model, and particularly if we understand here in this room that the WA government is not going to move quickly. It doesn't move quickly on anything. It's glacial, let's say. And we understand that if we do adopt the AusCycling model, there's going to be a transition period. What will funding look like in WA during that transition period? If it takes for 5 years for the state government to agree to release the funds that it's holding at the moment to AusCycle to support advocacy, to support trail development, to support grassroots mountain biking, for example, what will the funding look like from AusCycle whilst that's happening?
It's an interesting question, and it's probably one that's probably more for your state government, I would suggest. If the collective, and
it's not for the state government, it's for you guys, because
well,
you're asking us to trust you and vote on a proposition, and I'm asking you to explain to us what it will look like until the tail catches up. All those things that you say can happen and will happen.
So obviously, you know, if that is the outcome that arises, then we have to look at our modelling and make sure that work out how that all works. But if collectively, and what I'm trying to say is collectively, if you as a group in WA come together and support the AusCycling model, that's a message that you're sending to your state government that you support this concept and you support this proposal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's why I'm saying it's as much a question then for the state government to, but if they don't, then obviously we will work collectively with you to try and ensure that nothing goes backwards, things can still go forward, and the programs that are committed to now are preserved.
So how? And
until we know what your decision is, we have to have those discussions once.
If WestCycle came to us and said, listen, a condition precedent or subsequent to us is that these staff playing these roles who are currently funded by state government have to stay regardless of the response of the WA government. If we can have that guarantee, and then we're on board, you know, we've got to take that and work out what the answer is. You know, we're going to have to fill that hole somewhere. Maybe we can afford it. We haven't run the modelling on that. We're optimistic that we can keep that funding, but if Matt and the team Matt and Neil and the team came to us and said, you know, that's a critical piece, can you give us a cast in iron guarantee that regardless of state government funding, those people will continue to play those roles? We'll have to go and get an answer. Today we haven't modelled that. It may be plausible, but we haven't been asked that specific question.
Okay, so how long would it take for that modelling to be done and for you to give us an answer? Because that's really quite a critical piece for us to understand.
Weeks, not months.
Weeks, not months, before the end of November voting period.
Yep.
Yep. And if the modelling suggests that you can't fund it,
clearly we've got to find a yes. I mean, yeah.
Well, but seriously, I mean, we're looking at your graphs, and we know you've got $2.5 million committed. Sorry. So we know you've got $2.5 million committed from the national body, and we know you've made a whole lot of assumptions about funding and that sort of stuff. It's going to take time for the legislation to change in WA, if nothing else. Even if the will is there and the state government says, yes, we support you, cyclists, mountain bikers, road cyclists, we understand that's what you want. They can't make those changes without the legislation changing. That kind of stuff is all going to take time, and some of that time can be extremely long. So what happens in the meantime? How long can you support the level of advocacy, the level of commitment that's going on in WA?
My answer to the question is, you know, I can't answer that tonight because we haven't done the modelling. We've been operating on the optimistic assumption we can solve it. I don't think getting you that answer will take particularly long. And I think there's another question about how quickly you implement the transaction. Even if there was a yes vote, you know, WestCycle wouldn't cease to exist 2 weeks later. You know, we can pick our transition time. I think the most important thing is you have one management team that starts to operate as a management team. If we've got to synchronise what happens to the entities and what happens to the balance sheets with government processes, we've got to synchronise that. But where there's a constructive will, there'll be an answer.
I was just going to add to that, if the need is to keep the SSO vehicle in place to continue with that funding, that might be something that has to be phased into the process to ensure that that can be maintained. Nothing, you know, until we get to the point where we are faced directly with that from a yes vote, then we've got, and if that becomes the barrier that the government just says we're withdrawing all funding because there is no states, then maybe we have to look at a myriad of different strategies around maintaining that so that we can ensure that we can try and preserve that as part of the modelling exercise.
G'day, Steve Janik, WA Gravity Enduro. Also, I was a Western Australia mountain bike committee member 2011, 2012. I'm also a WestCycle mountain bike advisory, and I'm also the director of the Western Trails Alliance. What else? I've got 2 kids. I ride a bike. Thank you. I'm sort of new to the whole AusCycling concept. It's only sort of rattling around my brain for the past 6 months or so. I'm a very strong WA advocate. I don't care too much about the other states, but I am very strongly Australian, and I believe the AusCycling model definitely supports that. I believe in the growth of juniors, in particular the pathway developments, and making sure our younger riders have an opportunity to come up should they wish to, or should they have the talent to. We should make sure we have those pathways available for them. I strongly believe we've got some of the best riders in the world in our own backyard, i.e. Sam Hill, and I think we've got some other fantastic riders in our backyard as well, in BMX and cross country in particular as well. Firstly, I do very strongly support the AusCycling model, and I don't want to get caught up in the advocacy and all that sort of stuff that happens with funding and all that sort of stuff, because I think it should really come second to what this whole model is all about, which is getting more people cycling and getting on their bikes and just promoting cycling in general. So that's my preference, and that's how I sort of lean at the moment. However, I do want to just ask questions more particularly about the funding and how funding may be distributed to those pathways options that you had for AusCycling, and if there's any opportunity for the federal minister to pressure the state minister to ensure that there is substantial funding for WestCycle, because I certainly wish that it would continue in its current nature.
To answer that question, really, as the three NSOs, we've already looked at this, and we collectively put in. There's some new developments happening within Sport Australia and the AS around pathways that are to come on board in future. So there is the potential, obviously, then to seek federal funding to support pathways. Then obviously we would be looking to see if we could use leveraging, like you suggest, through federal ministers to state ministers to co-contribute. But we're looking to try and create a program where we can inject federal funding into a pathways program for all the disciplines across all the regions, but also to use that to then leverage further into state funding as well to support that as well.
Thank you for your time.
Hello, everybody. My name's Steve Dixon. I'm a former president of BMX Western Australia, was so for 8 years. Was on the board of BMX Australia as well. I'm still a current member of BMX Australia. I've got several questions, so bear with me please, guys. First of all, I want to know what you're going to do to address the $3 million deficit that CA have already brought into it, because in this process, clearly on your balance sheet, there's a $3 million deficit in CA. You're asking us to take a leap of faith and put from BMX Australia 400,000, Victorian Cycling 800, Queensland 800 grand, you know, New South Wales Cycling $1 million. We've got a $3 million deficit with a group of people that have been fiscally irresponsible for many, many years, and the national government have bailed them out over many successive years. How will the $2.5 million go towards addressing the $3 million deficit?
The deficit's no longer $3 million, and it never was. At its peak, it was $2.4 million. It's been repaid down, and if you look at the CA financial statements that come out this year, you'll find it's been lowered to probably closer to about 1.9, but you need to check the reports. The CA over the last 5 years, since 2014, when they suffered the loss due to a bad decision around a joint venture agreement, have traded profitably in a six-figure trading for each of those years since that time. At that same time, the board of CA was sacked, the management teams were all replaced, and the staff and management and board that were there back then no longer exist in that organisation, and there's been a complete changeover. And for the last 4 or 5 years, or last 4 years at least, it's been virtually a completely new management team, most cases new staff, and certainly a new board. So to call them fiscally irresponsible, I think is not appropriate nor right for the current organisation of CA. They made a bad decision back in 2013 that did go pear-shaped, and the organisation has recovered since that time and traded fiscally responsibly.
So your $3 million in your paperwork is incorrect?
I don't know where that $3 million is coming from.
Sorry, mate, I can't see you behind that pillar. G'day. None of the stuff...
Where is that paperwork? Where's the paperwork from?
This actually comes from your own workshop. There's a paperwork handed out at your AusCycle workshop.
Shane's description of the numbers is right. I don't know where the 3 comes from, but there is a significant debt. And there's 2 points. One, the current board and management of team of CA weren't around then. As Shane said, since we've been there, it's traded profitably. I don't think the debt should ever have existed. even pre-Ken Hayne, anyone who thinks you can fix a broken organisation or a broken federation by lending it more money, I don't think is thinking clearly, so it shouldn't have existed in the first place. And as part of this transaction, CA ceases to exist because we formed the view CA couldn't be fixed. It needed to be euthanased, and none of the state's money goes to repaying the government debt. The Sports Commission debt goes, and $2.5 million of cash comes in. So what will happen now is what should have happened 3 or 4 years ago. But just so we're really clear, no state cash is used to repay the Commonwealth government debt. To the contrary, $2.5 million of new government money comes in, which should have happened in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Secondly, this one's come up several times. It does appear that the deadline that you have set is very tight and probably brings some scaremongering into the associations. With a simple, as per your own, you've got a Q&A sheet in your own handouts. It says, what are the options for state or territory bodies if they do not wish to be part of the new company? Basically, and the bottom paragraph says, as a result, its members would not be eligible to compete in events organised by NUCO, including national championships. That's a threat. That's the reality is that's scaremongering to the associations and to all the clubs in them thinking that that is going to be the outcome, when very, very clearly it may not be the outcome.
It won't be the outcome. If it says, I haven't seen it say that, if it says that that's a mistake and we got that wrong, everyone makes mistakes, but that is not the case, and I haven't seen that written anywhere. No, I didn't. No, we've said consistently from the get-go that if AusCycling comes into existence and let's say one state votes no, the clubs in that state, as they can today, will become members of AusCycling. They will become an owner of AusCycling, and the members of that club, just the way they can get a CA licence today, will get a single one licence from AusCycling. So if you are a club in a no voting state, you will still be offered ownership of AusCycling, and your members can still buy a licence, a UCI licence, on that day as they can today, and we've been clear about that from the get-go.
So down to the point about licensing, currently BMX WA's most expensive licence is $168, which includes credit card fees. Your suggested platform across all disciplines is $250. How does that advantage any of BMX WA's members?
Well, if you want to just ride BMX, then the fee is $150 for an adult. It's $250 if you want to include road. If you just want a dirt licence, that's $150. Yes.
So that's not a unified licence then? That's still an individual licence to BMX or to cycling, road or to dirt?
It's a dirt licence which encompasses BMX, mountain bike and cyclocross. The higher price that you quoted incorporates those 3 disciplines, but also incorporates road and track.
And okay, thank you. Lastly, we are a country we're a nation and we have federation. Federation has worked, particularly for states like Western Australia, since its inception, and still works today, even down to the distribution of GST, which is still unfairly done. Western Australia still unfairly funds the rest of Australia, along with Queensland. If there is to be events held in Western Australia under this model, where the staff and we'll use AusCycling for example, will do all of the event planning, do the event management, do the event funding, where will the profits from the events go do they go directly to AusCycle, or do they stay in Western Australia with the non-incorporated clubs?
If that was done by the state office, then that money that's generated would go back into the state office budget.
But there's also how to go with this other people.
Right, we'll try and go quickly. I know there's a lot of people in the room still want to talk. I'm for BMX, ridden in the past, club committee, and currently vice president of Bunbury BMX Club. A lot of the questions I have already been asked, answered in the room. One particular one, BMX WA has quite a substantial amount of money in the bank. The reason that has been getting saved, according to the board, is to try and get an 8-metre facility for WA. We don't have one currently. The riders who want to go on the elite pathway have to travel, spend X amount of dollars. It's at the age where they're high school, pretty important time of their education to be picking up and going east. AusCycling, the Roadshows, have said they won't fund facilities. If this money gets handed over to AusCycle, what, if any, are the prospects of getting an 8-metre facility in WA?
It has to go to you, Martin.
Thanks for that. Look, we feel that we think that the organisation can be successful in terms of its lobbying and advocacy. To be able to get state governments to be putting in money to build those sort of facilities, and you know, we would prefer that the money that was being saved up could be used in other areas of supporting cycling activities in Western Australia. You know, at the moment we don't have the strength of numbers or the voice or capacity to be able to make those inroads with governments, and that's one of the reasons why we're trying to bring everybody into the one room, so that we can have the voice and the size that means that governments take us seriously, and governments are happy to fund those sorts of facilities at a state level, because they see that there's not only benefit for cycling within the state, but they understand that there's a large number of cyclists, and you know, that's a vote gainer for them. You know, we see it with the stuff that we put up around the ability of you know, AFL clubs, rugby league clubs, to be able to get governments to put in massive amounts of money for facilities. And they do that because it's a vote getter for them, because the minister can stand up and say, well, you know, we're supporting Essendon Football Club or Brisbane Broncos Rugby League Club. We want cycling to be the same sort of thing, where they get up and they say, we're supporting cycling and we're putting significant dollars into infrastructure within the state.
I get that, and I get the combined resources and the combined for the government. Back to the question, that leaves us a long time sorting out red tape. If all the government legislations and such have to be changed, you know, we're potentially a couple of years away from getting this just a training facility. Does it push it back 8 years, 10 years, 5 years? You know, there's a lot of in-between time, and don't get me wrong, I do agree with the one cycling and all the benefits from it. But just like we said, we're over here on the west, we're isolated, and traditionally it has been a problem to get your voice heard. You're saying that 19 entities is hard to deal with. I think it flips it back onto us, where our voice is lost amongst the 19 entities, trying to get ideas and whose needs and wants to the table.
Susan.
I'll say it loudly.
So Matt Fulton from Westcycle. I just wanted to pick that question up. So the state government does support a state facility for BMX and an 8-metre ramp. We've had discussions with them. There's a particular funding pot of money there that they allocate to these types of initiatives, and a third of the money has to come from local government, a third from state government, and then a third from the sport. So to reframe that question, the money's been saved up to contribute the third to get the facility. If that money goes into a national pot no longer accessible, they won't meet the criteria to add a third themselves. So will AusCycling contribute that third to get the facility?
It's been a question that's been raised in the combined workshops, and it's one that we've been looking at as to, you know, with it, and there's still some work to be done around it, in fairness. And there was a concept around, with some investments that are earmarked specific to that, and that is a specific investment and a savings pool. Could that then be sort of some sort of arrangement or, you know, facility put in place that when that funding becomes available, that can be redrawn on? It's not the case in every location because not everyone's doing that exact activity. This one is a specific one that you've designed. So it's certainly been a point raised and has been discussed, and there's something still to be, you know, can be worked through.
Okay, quick one. Two things. First thing for Matt and the board of AusCycle, when it comes to voting on behalf of the road and track clubs in West Australia, I understand it's the 6 members, which are BMX Sports, Mundabiddi, over 55s, Triathlon WA, Cycling Development Foundation, and West Coast Masters, none of whom represent us. So I would hope that the board take the position of the road and track clubs in West Australia when they cast that vote. I would sincerely hope that to be the case. The second is a question. So $1.9 million of debt, Duncan. I can't remember where it was put, but either yourself or Steve said that that debt is unlikely to get paid back, but the business just doesn't earn the money to pay it back. If we are faced with the scenario, well, we're currently participating in a democratic process. If we're faced with the scenario where BMXA and MTBA vote yes and CA vote no, are the Sports Commission going to call that debt, or are you going to declare the organisation insolvent and simply just form a new CA that rolls into the business, into AusCycle?
I've tried to avoid answering questions about all the permutations and combinations of how the election works out. It's my sort of first response. But no, I think as directors, we would need to keep operating CA. But I think the sport, a yes vote will come with real challenges implementing it. We all know that. Trust and all the issues we've just tackled tonight. But I think a no vote there carries lots of risk as well. This conversation's never been held before, and the risk of having this conversation and bringing the disciplines together and getting all these people in one room was inevitably going to become passionate, and we're getting a lot of pressure and inbound communication from the yes side and the no side, and I think we need to see what the answer is and then make good decisions when we see that answer. It's very hard to give a specific answer to all the permutations and combinations of, we vote yes, mountain bike vote no, BMX vote yes, 5-7, 5-3, 6-8, across the various disciplines. We've just got to look at what the result is and make good, wise decisions at that time. The debt, all the debts get repaid. $2.5 million comes in and all the debt gets repaid. The state debt gets repaid, the Commonwealth debt gets repaid, 2.5 comes in, there's $5 million left of net assets, and we move forward. In my view, it should never have existed, but it does. It should have gone in as equity, it went in as debt.
Just for the record, we've gone past the scheduled finish time, but we're going to try and get every question possible answered. I know everyone's got their hand up. We're trying to give everyone their time. Just bear with us, please.
Thank you again. I want to come back to the question of timing. I really think you guys aren't ready. Like, as in, I genuinely want to say that there's a lot of support in the room, what I'm hearing and what I've talked to, and certainly for myself, for where we want to get to. But can I just give it to you this way? For many, many years, women didn't have a vote in this country. When we changed that, if someone had said, oh, look, we'll just give you we'll let you, we're not going to change the law, we're not going to actually write it down, but just trust us. I would expect that people would be cynical of that. Now, if I can put it to you, I just don't think we're ready. The Constitution, I've spent a lot of time reading through the EY document and the proposed draft Constitution. I'd invite you to go and have a read of the WestCycle Constitution, of our sporting club's Constitution. I think you've got a flawed process when you considered the CA Constitution, a failed organisation which is focused only on racing, for example. If you go and read your Constitution, it does not reflect what you put on the slides. So, for example, if we're talking about community, if we're talking about safety, if we're talking about recreational riding, if we're talking about advocacy, if we're talking about transport, if we're talking about skills, if we're talking about the promotion of events, if we're talking about facilitation, if we're talking about the social aspects, if we're talking about volunteering, all of those things, and I did this afternoon reading through it, are detailed in our club's constitution, in the WestCycle Constitution. If you go and read the proposed constitution, it essentially reads about racing. And so what I think is, seriously, guys, if we're serious about making this happen, state at the base level, the thing that we're voting for, the thing we're signing up to, put what you intend to do in there. And I'll include in that, in terms of comment, if there is a guarantee which you've offered which says that state government funding goes back to the state that made it, put that in the Constitution as well. There is no drama, point being, I think there's support for the principles, but what you've written down, what you're actually asking us to vote on is not the slides, but is the draft Constitution, and that's not the same thing.
Oh, I think you're wrong.
I'm happy
you'll be
to...
very surprised to know, I'm a straight shooter, lots of you are, and you'll be surprised to hear me say that I think you're wrong. We are ready. If everyone voted yes, or 6 of the 8 voted yes, we will nail this. It will go really well. And, let me finish. And it's much harder to do than be commentators. You know, there are lots of theatre critics and not many playwrights in this process. We're trying to do something, and can I just... Yeah, sure, but we're the playwrights of this process, and we have got plenty of time to fix things like constitutions. Like, I actually agree with you.
I really invite you to reconsider the process. Do not come to us and say, vote on this thing here, but trust us on this thing over here. Take what you want to do and write it frickin' down. If you were going to, and pardon my French, but seriously, if I do business for a living, I run an SME, and if I said to one of my clients, this is what I'm going to deliver for you, and they say, but it's not in the contract, I would get laughed out of town. And so the Constitution, which is the fundamental document, which is the basis for where we want to go, AusCycling Constitution, it has a set of objects, it has a set of voting processes. The questions about voting and about what's a club member is not defined in there. There's just questions, and again, the support is here for where you want to be, I think, but the document doesn't represent it. And I'm happy to go through the line and verse. I spent hours on it this afternoon.
That's the point I'm trying to get to. The Constitution has changed a couple of times. There have been some significant changes because people have written to us, said, what about this idea? The State Advisory Councils are one of those. So go into print, write down what you think needs to change, and we can update it in a week.
There is a reason for the roadshow, to get the questions and answers out there.
We want the feedback. We're taking on board the feedback. People are giving us questions. They're being more than theatre critics. They're giving us feedback. We're making the changes and we're iterating as we go. If you think there's some things, write me, dmurray@beeson.com.au. Write me an email tomorrow with the changes to the Constitution and we'll look at them and incorporate
I'll hand back now, but I just want to confirm, when I asked you previously, and a number of other people asked you, is there a consultation process to change things, or is it basically our way or the highway? You essentially said, what we're presenting, you either vote yes or no to. What you've just said is very comforting, because what you're saying is that there is a consultation process and there is a chance for things to change. That's really good news, but thank you.
It has to be, it's a collaborative process, and there's a reason for the roadshow. It's not just to come and say this is how it's going to be. That's what a Q&A session sort of negates, doesn't it, surely? Absolutely. Yeah.
But we do have to get to a point where we have, you know, perhaps like an 80% or something that we can vote on. We can't keep changing it right up until the day. We hope that we have got it to a point, and you know, perhaps there is some more work that needs to be done that will actually appease a larger number of people, and we keep talking about the transition as well. And I mean, it's absolutely critical that the state leaders, that the management team, you know, a CEO who's not even on board yet, also gets the opportunity to make some of those changes. So we've done our best endeavours to get it to what we sort of consider an 80%, and we have incorporated changes, and we will continue to do so, but we will have to go to print at some point so that members have sufficient time to read it. It has, with the Constitution, it has been written in line with the Sports Australia governance principles. So it's not drastically different to a lot of the organisations and the sporting constitutions in Australia. But you know, at some point we do need to absorb some of those, stop, and then we'll do some more. I mean, we talked about in the presentation as well being a learning organisation, learning from others. It's not a set and forget. It does need to be something that's continuous improvement. And that's in everything that we do, from people, in our processes, in our legal documentation.
And on the consultative process, I made the welcoming point earlier. Some places we've been really welcome, some places we haven't. I can't recall who the letter was from. Maybe it was from WestCycle, maybe it was from the Minister, but I got a letter 2 weeks ago saying you're not welcome in WA, don't come, don't have a roadshow, don't consult. We've done our best.
Who was the letter from?
Minister or WestCycle?
Can you be specific? Sorry, that's quite slanderous, really. Who's it from?
Matt, you know the answer. Who wrote to us saying please don't have a roadshow?
Cam and I had a conversation around using some time to talk to our board and meeting with the WestCycle board, the BMX board, to consult with us.
But who was the letter from? Whose letterhead? Sure.
Was it the Minister or not?
Can't tell you, can't remember.
You just said it.
I think it was the Minister. I'll have to go and check.
I'll talk to Nick tomorrow. The Minister has said what we might call him today. Our competitors can't go into Pro National.
Cam French here. Who asked us not? Who wrote to us saying please don't have a roadshow? Right. Who did it come from?
Exactly what I just said was we requested that you came and met with our board and the BMX board to discuss the concept of proposal with the organisation.
Did you write to us, mate, saying please don't come on the roadshow?
I'd have to go look at it. I've got no idea what words are in there.
Sorry, I need a microphone.
Yes, Alan, Westside BMX. Just a question. AusCycling, will they honour the current agreements that BMX Australia have with Western Australia with regards to, say, national championships?
Yeah, look, all the currently existing agreements that are in place across all the organisations will be honoured. So the agreement that we have for the national championships will be honoured as part of it, even if we go into AusCycling.
Look, despite a little bit of animosity at in the last few questions, I think that there is still a lot of potential support to have a consensus group at a national level, and I really would urge people not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but I would really like to encourage you to look at the success of WestCycle and the constitution, as Daniel has been talking about, and the governance hierarchy and the representation you have. And I think the difference is, I guess you've been looking at sport, and it's quite clear that you're all very much from a sporting background. And so when you go and look at the constitutions of other sports, what you don't have is that the contribution of football to moving across the city, or the contribution of football to the long-term prevention of health outcomes, congestion, etc. And so we really need to have a broader approach to your constitutional model. And so I agree with Daniel, we really need to understand that what we're signing up for, that what you're going to do and what we're going to be agreed to is in your constitution. And so I would encourage you to slow down a little bit, because November is a tight deadline, and we all have to accept that sometimes deadlines have to change in order to bring everybody along, and otherwise it becomes a bit of a stoush, and we've got psychological karate here, people batting up against each other, and what we really need is more psychological judo, where we're grabbing the energy in the room and we're all moving along in the other direction, because as you say, that's where the funds are, that's where the increased membership is, that's where the opportunities are in terms of actually building a better city. And when we get all those kids not learning how to be sports people on bikes, but just grabbing their bikes, then that's the seedy underbelly, which then feeds into BMX and cycling and all the other things that happen. But those kids have got to own a bike first. They've got to know how to put a chain back on and all those things. And that just comes to being a school kid whipping around on a bike, as the gentleman second from my left said about your kid wanting to ride a bike. We've got to get that happening, but it does mean bringing us all together. But please, let's get the constitution right, and let's get all the bits we agree on right first, rather than it being a yes-no, winner-loser situation. Thank you.
And at some point we're going to have to wind this up, but I'm going to take your cues on how we manage this, because there's still a lot of people with questions to ask. So, pardon? We might run for another 13 minutes. We were going to allocate through to 9:30, if that's okay. I know this gentleman has been waiting for some time, so excuse us. We're just trying to get the mic to everyone who's asking for it.
Good evening. Thank you for giving up your most precious commodity, which is your time. I'm a mountain bike member. I'm a member of Perth Mountain Bike Club, and I do a few cyclocross races here in WA. The problem that you have is the membership, and you've kind of got two tiers of one licence. You've got your road and everything, which is $250, and you've got your mountain bike or dirt, which is $150. So it's really two tiers of kind of a licence. But I don't see why we've got to handicap the roadies for an extra $100 to race a race. Whereas in New Zealand, they're only $65, and you can do road, track and mountain bike, which covers cross as well. So I don't know if how you've done your modelling. I looked at the EY, I've looked at a few other things, and I can't find out where you're going. Well, there's about 21,000 paid up race members for CA. I'm happy to be corrected. But that's like an extra $2.1 million for having that extra $100 on, which is a substantial amount of money. But then if, I think Liam and also Aaron have mentioned it, but wouldn't it be better if you're being a cycle advocacy group federally and also in the state-based with more members? And I wouldn't actually fork out an extra $100 to race road, and you're not even including masters. But if you can bring it back down to, I think you had it down at $80 across the board, and then all the state governments, when they do the driver's licence, they actually have a 5-year membership, so you can pay 5 years. But it would be interesting to see what your financial modelling turns out when you've got, okay, so I know mountain bike, I think there was an extra 80 people that went from mountain bike to road, and I think only 23 from BMX went to the full race licence. So the question basically is, why across the world is the CA, soon to be Australian Cycling race licence, so much more expensive compared to definitely our near neighbours New Zealand. England, I can't remember, I think it's about £100, so that's about, no, it's a bit less than that. And then US is a bit cheaper as well. Anyway.
So the model is actually prefaced a lot off what the UK do, and they do have a, I guess you could call it a surcharge to the road. And if you look at the British Cycling race licence, it's the same process. They have a dirt licence and then they have a surcharge onto race road. But to answer your question around the modelling, we looked at all various options. The pricing across all the disciplines is quite significant, and we've had a number of race members on the road who are paying probably in excess of $300 for their licence. So we've tried to bring pricing down where we can, and we've tried to not lift pricing significantly where we can't. To fit in the middle ground just didn't work necessarily, so we've tried to make those economies where we can. But one of the primary principles that we went to was we wanted to make kids' sport initially the same and as affordable as possible. And to try, and I take your point, you know, it'd be lovely to have more and more members to support it, but the financial reality at this stage, because of the way the financial models have been, just doesn't support that, and it would take too big a deficit out of the operating revenues of AusCycling. Why it's at that point, I guess it comes back to tiers of charging in the past from a road and track perspective, where there's a national charge and then a state charge and then a club charge. So that sort of drives it. In some of the others, those prices may not be as high, but we worked very hard to try and bring it into something that was feasible and achievable, but didn't sort of create too big a deficit. And, you know, nothing is perfect, but we've done the best that we can to get it to where there are some savings and some, you know, minor increases, but the benefit is that you can access other disciplines. If you took your road licence and you choose to ride mountain bike, there is a considerable, significant saving. So.
Me again. I just wanted to ask you about the voting tiers that you have come up with. I don't know anything about track or road cycling, so I can't comment on that. But I know that from a BMX point of view, a club is a club. And whether we have 3 members, 30 members, 300 members, the needs of that club are substantially the same. So my question is, why did you go for a tiered system rather than a one club, one vote? Particularly in Western Australia, we have very isolated clubs that have small numbers simply because of their locations. So as it seems at the moment, New South Wales and Victoria combined with all their clubs and the tiered system can outvote all the other clubs, so all the other states, which doesn't seem equitable to me. And also, can you explain what clubs would be allowed to vote on, what sort of criteria there is around, yeah, what would they be asked to vote on?
Okay, so I'll answer the second part of the question first. What would clubs be asked to vote on? It would be the election of elected directors to the board, which would be once a year, and it would be anything to do with a constitutional change. So they're the 2 items.
So in that context, why doesn't the club need to be voted?
Okay, I'm getting to that part. So we recognise that there are quite large clubs. There's clubs of in excess of 800 up to 1,000 or more. There's also clubs of 10, and they all have different purposes and reasons. Their numbers are varied because of sometimes it's a geographical constraint, other times it's just what that club's decided to do. They have a very focused point of what their objectives are, and they limit their numbers. It's a bit like in the presentation when we talk about the 80-to-1. If we gave 1 vote per member to a club and you had 800 members in your club and one club had 10, it'd be an 80-to-1. But again, I'm coming to that. That would disenfranchise a number of the larger clubs. So it was we spent a lot of time trying to come up with a model that we felt was fair and equitable. And so a larger club in most cases in the discussions have said we would prefer the other model. We would want 1 vote per member of our club, 1-to-1. So if I've got 800 members, we want 800 votes. versus a club who has 10, they would have 10 votes. So, so in the discussions, many of the larger clubs have actually come back and said, we actually prefer this model. We recognise that we actually lose the potential to argue for one-to-one and voting is reduced, but it doesn't completely disenfranchise us from growing our club, and we believe that it's a much more fair and equitable model. Voting models are, we looked at multiple levels, and then we looked at multiple variations of how we disseminated the votes and what the tiers became, and this we felt after discussions was the most fair and equitable across what has existed.
We've got 5 minutes to go and one more time for one more question probably. I don't know, we'll see how we go.
Hi, really quick question. You said before about WestCycle and the changeover, so you said that WestCycle have done a lot of good work here and stuff like that. They obviously have a structure that's quite advanced compared to a lot of the country. You said before that the people who are involved in WestCycle already will be offered a position if a changeover happens. Will their roles or responsibilities change? Will it just be a straight swap? It won't look any different to us? Or are you suggesting that what the structure that's there now will stay in place? It will just be they'll be wearing different shirts, or what's involved?
Initially, that would be it'd be expected that the roles that exist today would just carry across. But again, that would be a discussion that when we got to that point, that we would be able to have the discussion with WestCycle or the staff and the board as to what roles do they think they need, what roles do they want anything changed. But ultimately, if there's no change, all roles would continue as they are today and be offered on that basis. But there may be something they're willing to, say we would prefer to do something here. We don't know.
I've just got one quick question, and that is, what happens if, say, BMX WA decide they don't want to do it, all the clubs vote against it, and they don't hand over their money, and you guys get up and it's AusCycling is a organisation? Is that then just splintering BMX in Australia?
Yeah, well, if AusCycling gets up, then obviously we've had the required number of states and territories vote for it. So we have to honour that decision that's made by the majority of clubs, of state associations, and then AusCycling will come into existence. As we've said before, it's then a matter for the states that have voted no to decide what they want to do, whether they want to stay out or whether they actually decide they do want to come into it once they know it's going ahead. But certainly we would take the view that, as we've said all along, this is about the strength in numbers and having everybody involved. So we would continue the discussions with BMX WA to try and see if we can work through what the issues are and what the problems are to get to a stage where they were comfortable to come into AusCycling.
We're going to have to try and keep it tight, guys, because we've got still many more people wanting to ask questions. There's some planes to catch as well, just that we've got to keep that into consideration.
I've just got a question down the back here. Have you thought about when we're obviously winding up our assets, if we get to that stage, that everybody comes onto the playing field equally? So depending on how many clubs, if we all come in, obviously BMX WA has quite a significant amount of money along with WestCycle. Is there a chance that everybody can come into this with the same playing field, with the same amount of money?
It was considered and looked at, but in some situations, the amount of money that an organisation, you would have to go to the lowest amount, because if they don't have it, they don't have it. It just made the financial modelling not work, unfortunately. You know.
We could probably go to more detail. We've got Matt Fulton just with one last question.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one last comment. Thanks, Rob. So firstly, I just wanted to acknowledge the guys up the front. I know you are doing this from a really good place. A lot of you are volunteering, giving your time up to do this, and I think everyone in this room recognises that commitment and what you're trying to create by merging the three disciplines. And certainly from WestCycle's perspective, we're very supportive of that part of the process and want to make sure that's acknowledged. If I am reading the room right tonight, and certainly WestCycle's position, we agree with 75, 80, 85% of what's gone up and been presented. And I think if we can work on fine-tuning the 15%, we're going to end up in a really good place. But there's some clear objections here that we need to work through. But thank you for making the time to come over to WA.
Everyone, thanks very much. Shane, Martin, Lee and Duncan, thanks for taking the time, and I hope you get your flights. And thanks everyone. It's a robust conversation. We're expecting that, and it's a step in the right direction, because there's questions that have been raised that not everyone had been able to vocalise before. Have a good ride home, enjoy the weather, and onwards and upwards.
No, we need to.